Chapter 582. The Yinma clan was not monolithic. There were also close and distant relatives. Chu Wuji was one of them, so he already knew Chu Xiu's identity. Hearing Mr. Lu's words, Chu Wuji frowned slightly and said, "Senior Wei actually thinks so highly of Chu Xiu that he's willing to give him such an important mission? Would the other Yinma clan members be willing? After all, this is a good thing to gain prestige. It could even be said to be giving prestige for free. There are many seniors in the Yinma clan. Although their disciples are not as good as Chu Xiu, they are not weak either." Mr. Lu snorted lightly and said, "Those old things are all very cunning. In the past, when my Yinma clan was in the most urgent situation, they were all hiding in the dark like turtles. Now, seeing that my Yinma clan has recovered a little, they want to fight for credit? Dream on. Senior Wei is the last survivor among the 5 sky demons of the 9th heaven mountain. Whoever he wants to send will go. It won't be so easy for others to reap the benefits." Chu Wuji nodded. No matter what, he would definitely stand on Wei Shuya's side. When he was in despair and joined the diabolism, he had received a lot of kindness from Wei Shuya. If the righteous sects were hypocritical, then the diabolism was the cruel reality. Without strength, no one would treat you as one of their own. If Wei Shuya had not helped him several times, Chu Wuji might have been dead by now, and he would not have become a martial Dao grandmaster. At this moment, the whispering between Mr. Lu and Chu Wuji did not attract the attention of the people present. Their attention was on Zhang Chengzhen and the others. After Zhong Xian, Fang Qi Shao, and Chu Xiu expressed their stance, Ying Bailu also stood up with a gentle smile on his face and said, "Brother Zhang is very courageous. I'll accompany you." In the end, Li Feilian did not say a word, but he held the flying knife in his hand and took a step forward. In terms of temperament, Li Feilian was actually the calmest among the people present. No one even knew what he was thinking. However, no matter how indifferent he was, Li Feilian was still a young man, and he had his own pride. Even if his ranking wasn't as high as Zhang Chengzhen's, he wouldn't reject Zhang Chengzhen's challenge, regardless of the outcome. Everyone present couldn't help but be excited when they saw this scene. This was a rare event that only happened once in 100 years. Zhang Chengzhen wanted to fight against 5 elites on the Dragon and Tiger list all by himself. Moreover, none of the 5 people he wanted to challenge were weak. Each of them had the strength to fight him alone. This was an extremely dangerous move. He wanted to use Chu Xiu and the others as whetstones, but it should be known that if he was not careful, he might also become a whetstone for Chu Xiu and the others. After a short period of silence, a wave of energy that caused the hearts of others to palpitate instantly erupted. Zhong Xian and Chu Xiu were the first to attack. Among the people present, no one could compare to Zhong Xian and Chu Xiu when it came to attacking fiercely and explosively. These two could be said to be the 2 people with the strongest attack power. Zhong Xian held the prison-suppressing Akalanatha seal in his hand, and the four-armed Akalanatha hand formed a seal and smashed it down with a deafening sound. When Chu Xiu slashed out with his saber, demonic aura and sanguine aura condensed together. Its might was ferocious and powerful, but in fact, his saber contained boundless hatred. The saber strike that was filled with hatred was aimed at Zhang Chengzhen's body, as well as his heart. Amidst the whistling wind, Zhang Chengzhen's long hair fluttered, and even a trace of lightning appeared in his eyes. He pressed his hands down, and green lightning condensed in his palms, turning into a dragon and a tiger. Green lightning splashed in all directions, and they rushed toward Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian. The clouds followed the dragon, and the wind followed the tiger. The power of the dragon and tiger gathered wind and clouds, guiding the lightning. With a boundless thunderstorm, it crushed Zhong Xian's prison-suppressing Akalanatha seal and Chu Xiu's knife, and it did not even make the boundless hatred in his knife play a role. However, at this moment, a flying dagger suddenly appeared in front of Zhang Chengzhen. There were so many martial artists present, and even some martial Dao masters did not see when Li Feilian used the flying dagger. Through the void, the knife locked on to Zhang Qingzhen's divine soul. At the same time, Fang Qixiao's sword was already out of its sheath, and the tip of the sword was pointed directly at Zhang Qingzhen. Regardless of the thunderstorm, it could not stop the seemingly simple but powerful sword. The karma swordsmanship, the sword will hit the target. Fang Qixiao and Li Feilian were both martial artists who had comprehended the karma swordsmanship. With a knife and a sword to lock the soul, Zhang Qingzhen could not escape. Even if it was Chu Xiu, he would have to use the heaven sun gazing at air skill to the extreme to be able to escape this knife and sword. However, Zhang Qingzhen did not want to escape. Standing in the same place, at the moment when the knife and sword were about to hit him, Zhang Qingzhen's figure turned into purple lightning. His speed was simply too fast, and he had moved a step in an instant. It even gave people an illusion that he was standing there, without moving. He gently pointed a finger, and a faint ray of lightning bloomed. However, it was this faint lightning that led Fang Qixiao's sword and Li Feilian's knife, causing the two to collide. Li Feilian's flying knife was immediately broken, and Fang Qixiao also took a step back. Zhang Qingzhen actually relied on his extreme speed to break the karma swordsmanship. However, at this time, Ying Bailu, who had not made a move until now, also made his move. His martial path was not as fierce and violent as Chu Xiu's and Zhong Xian's, nor was it as mystical as Li Feilian's and Fang Qixiao's. However, his martial path did not have any obvious weakness, and he could adapt to any situation and assume any position. The moment Zhang Qingzhen dodged, Ying Bailu had already made his move. In order to dodge the knife and sword, Zhang Qingzhen's speed was raised to the extreme. In order to break the karma swordsmanship, Zhang Qingzhen's attention was also raised to the extreme. Therefore, Ying Bailu did not make a move. He was waiting for Zhang Qingzhen's state to change. As long as Zhang Qingzhen relaxed a little, it would be his turn to make a move. And now, that opportunity had arrived. The ink-colored astral energy turned into a black dragon and condensed into a knife, with the dragon's head as the handle, the dragon's body as the tip, and the dragon's tail as the blade. Great Dragon Saber. The saber slashed down, accompanied by a dragon's roar. The saber intent was extremely sharp, and it just happened to seize the slight gap when Zhang Qingzhen relaxed. Zhang Qingzhen did not turn his head, and it was too late for him to do so. However, lightning condensed around his body, turning into a lightning talisman that shielded behind him. Lightning exploded, and the black dragon dissipated, but Zhang Qingzhen was also blasted back more than 10 steps. In the first exchange, Zhang Qingzhen had fallen into a disadvantageous position. However, in the crowd's view, it was normal for Zhang Qingzhen to fall into a disadvantageous position. It would be strange if he could gain the upper hand. First, he displayed his terrifying strength with the Wind Cloud Dragon Tiger Lightning Force, blocking Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian, who had the fiercest physical strength. After that, he focused all of his attention and spiritual power to the extreme, and combined that with his lightning-like speed, he broke through Li Feilian and the 7th young Master Fang's Tao of Karma. At this time, he seemed to be relaxed, but in reality, he didn't have any extra strength left. That was why he was forced back by Ying Bailu, who attacked last. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu and the others attacked again, but this time, it was Fang Qixiao who made the first move. Sharp sword light sprinkled down. Fang Qixiao's sword seemed to have a mind of its own, sealing all of Zhang Qingzhen's escape routes. As long as Zhang Qingzhen made the slightest movement, the sword light would change, neither attacking nor defending, only trapping Fang Qixiao. Although Fang Qixiao was alone, the effect was similar to a sword formation. Zhang Qingzhen said indifferently, "The Sword King City's siege sword formation? It's useless against me." Fang Qixiao raised his eyebrows and said, "Good eyesight, but whether it's useful against you or not, we'll see later." Zhang Qingzhen's figure moved, lightning flashing around him, but before he could break the formation, Zhong Xian's body was already shining with dazzling Buddhist light, crushing over. Behind him, the pharmacist glazed light King Dharma idol protected him, and when the seal fell, it was like a landslide. Zhang Qingjun blasted out the Five Thunder execution technique in his hand. Although the power of the Five Thunder execution technique was extremely strong and even seriously injured Yu Qifeng just now, in the face of Zhong Xian, whose physical cultivation was abnormally strong, even the Five Thunder execution technique could not hurt Zhong Xian. It only made the Buddha's light around him dim a little. At the same time, Chu Xiu's body bloomed with Buddhist light, and the shadow of Mahavairokkana appeared behind him. His palm fell, changing the sun to steal the heavens. Under the sun-changing technique, the power of the palm directly enveloped Zhang Qingjun, forcing Zhang Qingjun to shine with lightning, and layers of thunder talismans overlapped, but they exploded one after another. In the past, when Chu Xiu's strength was not as good as Zhong Xian's, he used the sun-changing technique to fight Zhong Xian head-on. At this time, Chu Xiu's strength was not what it used to be, and the power of the sun-changing technique was naturally not the same. Fang Qi Shao's siege sword formation was around, and Zhong Xian was also in front of him. Zhang Qingjun could not move in a large range, and could only use thunder talismans to resist, but the powerful power of the sun-changing technique had already blasted Zhang Qingjun 3 feet into the ground. Ying Bailu was not idle either. The black gang qi around him evolved into the black dragon spear, and the spear momentum was big and wide. Together with Zhong Xian, who attacked fiercely, it was almost invulnerable. Ying Bailu's martial arts were like this, ever-changing, hard, and soft. No matter who he cooperated with, he could exert the greatest effect. And the most terrifying one was Li Failian. He only had 10 flying knives, and the first knife was to test Zhang Qingjun's strength. He had already tested Li Failian's strength, and with Li Failian's character, he would either not use his knife, or when he did, it would be a fatal blow. Chu Xiu and the other 4 had never cooperated before. On the contrary, there were more or less some grudges between them, or they were just passers-by. But now, in the second round, they already had a tacit understanding. In the first attack, both sides were testing each other, including Chu Xiu and the others, to test each other's strength. And when the second attack came, they found their own positions, the most suitable positions for themselves. Fang Qi Shao was in charge of intercepting, Zhong Xian, who had a strong body, was in charge of resisting, Ying Bailu was in charge of supporting Zhong Xian, making up for the flaws in his wild fighting style, Chu Xiu was in charge of attacking head-on, and Li Failian was always waiting for a flaw for a fatal blow. Chapter 583. In such a short time, Zhang Qingjun was forced into a desperate situation. Everyone present could not help but shake their heads. Zhang Qingjun was still a little too impulsive. None of those ranked in the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard were weaklings. Zhang Qingjun might be able to defeat them one-on-one, but it would be impossible for him to win so easily. However, he had to fight against 5 of them alone. His chances of winning were pitifully low. At this moment, Zhang Qingjun was besieged by 4 people and had Li Failian glaring at him from the outside. However, his expression did not change at all. In fact, he had expected this scene from the beginning. Zhang Qingjun had never underestimated anyone. If Zhong Xian, Chu Xiu, and the others were trash, he would not have challenged the 5 of them. In that desperate situation, Zhang Qingjun's eyes switched between yin and yang. The unyielding yang qi and the cold yin qi burst out and condensed in the lightning. Lightning was born from the yin and yang qi. Lightning was yang, and lightning was yin. The Celestial Master Mansion cultivated the Thunder method, but the Celestial Master Mansion was an orthodox Taoist sect. They cultivated the Thunder method, but at the end of the day, they actually cultivated the way of yin and yang in the world. The Thunder method was just a kind of power that evolved from the power of yin and yang. In an instant, 2 bolts of lightning, several feet thick, flowed around Zhang Qingjun. One of them was as hot as fire, and the other was as black as ink, like mud. Yang lightning and Yin lightning. The two forces combined and continuously spiraled and exploded. They tore apart Fang Qi Xiao's siege sword formation, forced Zhong Xian and Ing Bailu back, and forcibly resisted Chu Xiu's great sun-changing technique. Finally, they completely destroyed the Vairocana shadow behind him. Li Filian held the flying knife in his hand and focused his mind to the extreme. However, he still did not use the knife in the end because he was not confident. When the two bolts of lightning dissipated, Zhang Qingzhen's face was slightly pale. Obviously, he was under great pressure to control this kind of power. At this time, Zhang Xiling was no longer in the mood to fight for the Daoist connotation. All his attention was on Zhang Qingzhen. Zhang Qingzhen was the future hope of the celestial master abode. Nothing must happen to him. At this moment, looking at Zhang Qingzhen's appearance, Zhang Xiling couldn't help but mutter anxiously, he was too impulsive. I was too impulsive. The Yin-Yang infinite thunder that Zhang Qingzhen used just now was the secret method of the Celestial Master Mansion, which used the power of Yin and Yang to trigger the origin of thunder. Even the martial Dao Grand Masters of the Celestial Master Mansion did not dare to say that they could completely control the power of heaven and earth. Now that Zhang Qingzhen used these secret methods, it was obvious that he was also under great pressure. In fact, in the Celestial Master abode, ordinary disciples would not be able to come into contact with so many cultivation methods and secret techniques. You would have to wait until you were strong enough, or until a master agreed to teach you. Only then would you be able to learn those cultivation methods and secret techniques. However, these rules were useless to Zhang Qingzhen. Those cultivation methods and secret techniques in the Celestial Master abode could be read by Zhang Qingzhen at will. After all, his status and strength were there. However, Zhang Xiling now regretted it. If he had known this would happen, he would not have let Zhang Qingzhen learn so many secret techniques that he could not control. Everyone thought that Zhang Qingzhen had a sense of propriety, but once he was willful, no one could stop him. Lightning flashed, and Zhang Qingzhen made a Taoist seal with his hand. The Gang Qi around him burned fiercely, and a divine shadow condensed behind him. The Taoist connotation was ethereal, but it was surrounded by thunder. Anyone who understood the Tao lineage would be able to recognize that the divine figure was the heavenly lord of the nine heavens responding thunder that the Tao lineage worshipped. The heavenly lord divine shadow made a Taoist seal with his hand, and with a wave of his hand, powerful thunder of 5 thunder execution, heavenly thunder of purple heaven, heavenly thunder of heaven, and other different attributes of thunder fell and took the initiative to attack Chu Xiu and the others. However, Chu Xiu frowned slightly. What was Zhang Qingzhen trying to do? Did he really want to force himself into a desperate situation? Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique had the power to steal the fortune of heaven and earth and change the sun. It absorbed the power of Vairocana into one's own body, and the requirement for strength foundation was not ordinary. The human body could not withstand this power, and when used, the qi and blood in Chu Xiu's body seemed to be boiling and burning because of this power. Now that Zhang Qingzhen's secret technique was similar to Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique, it also contained the power of the heavenly lord of the nine heavens responding thunder and heavenly lord of the nine heavens. However, the consumption was not ordinary. His Gang Qi was consumed like flowing water. Not to mention that Zhang Qingzhen was not a martial Dao Grand Master yet. Even if he had become a martial Dao Grand Master, the martial Dao true core could not absorb so much qi of heaven and earth to consume. However, since Zhang Qingzhen had already made a move, Chu Xiu and the others naturally would not dodge and attack together. Even Li Filian had already slashed out his 3 flying daggers. The sky was filled with thunder and lightning, and the deafening roar of Gang Qi sounded. Being in the thunder and lightning, Chu Xiu also exerted his strength foundation to the extreme for the first time. Moreover, this was not the kind of battle with martial Dao Grand Masters, but a fight between people of the same level. Everyone was in the oneness of heaven and man realm, but each of them exerted the power of this realm to the extreme. It could be said that the few of them were almost at the peak of the entire young generation in the underworld. Zhang Qingzhen fought against 5 alone. He wanted to use the pressure of Chu Xiu and the others as a sharpening stone, so that his strength could reach perfection and step into the martial Dao Grand Master realm. But in reality, in the battle, Chu Xiu and the others were not sharpening stones. Each of them was an extremely sharp blade. In the battle, they would either sharpen their opponent's blade, or both sides would suffer heavy losses. At this stage of the battle, the few of them had actually used their full strength, except for the secret technique of burning their blood essence. However, even though Zhang Qingzhen had used this level of secret technique, he still could not withstand the joint attack of Chu Xiu and the others. In less than 100 breaths, the aura around Zhang Qingzhen had gradually weakened. The divine image of the divine Lord of Universal Thunder behind him had also gradually dimmed. Fang Qi Shao's sword turned into thousands of swords, and each sword strike blocked Zhang Qingzhen's chance to dodge. Zhong Xian, on the other hand, held the great virtue Akalanatha seal in his hand, which had the power to shake mountains. Ing Bailu's body was surrounded by black energy, which turned into a black dragon that circled around him. Every time his fist landed, the black dragon would roar and roar. Chu Xiu also used his full strength. He performed the colorless sealing palm imprint, and the life and death in his palm could overturn heaven and earth. This was the strongest martial technique created by Master Tam Yuan in the past. When its power was unleashed to the extreme, it was even more powerful than the Great Sun shifting technique. Li Feilian, who was at the back, had also unleashed 5 saber strikes at the same time. Apart from the saber strike that he had used to put his life on the line, this was already his full strength. Sensing the energy wave, even the martial Dao Grand Masters present had a slight change of expression. Even a martial Dao Grand Master would not be able to withstand a pincer attack from the 5 of them. If it was Zhang Qingzhen, he would most likely be dead as well. However, at this moment, thousands of lightning bolts suddenly bloomed in Zhang Qingzhen's eyes. The Universal Heavenly Lord's divine shadow behind him completely shattered, but it did not dissipate. Instead, it condensed into his body. As Zhang Qingzhen absorbed the divine shadow, the sky full of thunderstorms suddenly fell and shrouded Zhang Qingzhen. At the same time, the thunderstorms also completely destroyed the attacks of Chu Xiu and the others. The thunderstorms were evolved from the power of heaven and earth. No matter how strong a human was, they could not resist the power of heaven and earth. However, in the thunderstorms, Zhang Qingzhen was unscathed. His aura was even rising bit by bit. As his aura rose to the extreme, it was as if something had shattered, and a powerful aura immediately spread across the entire place. With a wave of his hand, the boundless thunderstorms around Zhang Qingzhen began to shrink completely. In the end, they turned into the size of a pill and were swallowed by Zhang Qingzhen. In an instant, the thunderstorms surged like a thunderstorm. Thunderclap Golden Pill. Zhang Xiling looked at Zhang Qingzhen with a face of ecstasy and disbelief. Zhang Xiling was not too excited that Zhang Qingzhen had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Not to mention the Celestial Master abode, everyone in the underworld knew that Zhang Qingzhen had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. What he was really excited about was that Zhang Qingzhen had condensed the Thunderclap Golden Pill that no one in the Celestial Master abode had condensed for thousands of years. The martial Dao True Pellet realm was the most important realm for martial artists. At the same time, the 3 lineages of Taoism, Buddhism, and Demon had extremely detailed analysis of this realm. Drawing the power of heaven and earth to refine the martial Dao True Pellet in the Dantian and communicate with the power of heaven and earth. Buddhism called it the Sarira, while Taoism called it the Golden Pill. When a golden pill was swallowed into the abdomen, one would know that one's fate was not up to the heavens. The so-called Golden Pill in Taoism was the meaning of the martial Dao True Pellet. The martial Dao True Pellet marked that a martial artist could officially connect with heaven and earth, step into a mysterious realm, and integrate with heaven and earth. The changes were different for each sect and even for each person. For example, the lineage of the Celestial Master Abode had cultivated thunder to the extreme and stepped into the Grandmaster realm. What they condensed was the thunderclap golden pill. When they breathed, there would be the sound of thunder, and in an instant, they could transform the chi of heaven and earth into the power of thunder. However, the thunderclap golden pill was extremely difficult to cultivate. At least in the past 1,000 years, no one in the Celestial Master Abode had successfully cultivated it. Zhang Qingzhen was the first. It was no wonder that after such a long time, Zhang Qingzhen could condense the martial Dao true pellet and step into the Grandmaster realm, but he had been accumulating it. It turned out that he had a big plan. He was actually preparing to condense the thunderclap golden pill that no one in the Celestial Master Abode had refined for thousands of years. Shrouded in the boundless thunder, Zhang Qingzhen took out the array disc containing the Taoist connotation from the secret spacebox and threw it into the air. Under the blessing of the array, it floated above the hull. Looking at Chu Xiu, Zhong Xian, and the others, Zhang Qingzhen said in a deep voice, "I've lost the bet. I've lost, and the Taoist connotation is yours." After that, Zhang Qingzhen turned around and left. He didn't even help Zhang Xiling to continue fighting for the other Taoist connotation. Everyone on the scene was stunned. But then everyone realized that Zhang Qingzhen had a point when he said that he had lost. Fighting 1 against 5, Zhang Qingzhen was almost bound to lose. If Zhang Qingzhen hadn't stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm in the last blow, he might have been seriously injured. But at the same time, although Zhang Qingzhen lost, he also won because he had achieved his goal. He had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm and condensed the thunderclap true pellet. Anyway, no matter what, Zhang Qingzhen didn't lose. Chapter 584. Zhang Qingzhen stepped into the Grand Master realm and left calmly, but it almost drove Zhang Xiling crazy. "You admit that you lost, so be it. Why did you throw out the Dao accumulation?" Since Zhang Qingzhen has now become a Grand Master, even if he wants to leave with the Dao accumulation, others can't stop him. Also, forget about throwing out the Dao accumulation in your hand, why do you still want to leave? Did you forget that you still have a Master's Junior who is fighting here? Seeing Zhang Xiling's expression, Emperor Qinqingdi sneered and said, "There are a lot of people fishing for fame in your Celestial Master Mansion, but this Junior Zhang Qingzhen is not bad. He means what he says. Since he admitted that he lost, he will naturally hand over the Taoist connotation. I like this character. As for why he left, Zhang Xiling, are you stupid? You just stepped into the real pellet state, and your unstable and restless real pellet fought with others. Are you going to cripple this kid?" Hearing Qinqingdi's words, Zhang Xiling reacted. He just stepped into the real pellet state. Because the real pellet had just been condensed, it was not very compatible with his body, so he must first cultivate for a while to stabilize the real pellet. Zhang Qingzhen had just stepped into this realm, so it was naturally impossible to stay here and fight with others unless he didn't want his foundation. However, Zhang Xiling also glanced at Qinqingdi in surprise. "He actually came to remind me?" Qinqingdi said faintly, "I've vented my anger by beating you up. The grievances between me and your Taoist Master Mansion are over, but if there are any cats and dogs barking in front of me, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Qinqingdi knew the power of the Taoist Master Mansion. Although he was not afraid of the Taoist Master Mansion, he was not crazy enough to fight with the Taoist Master Mansion to the end just because of some quarrel. If he really wanted to fight to the death, he would have killed the real fire spirit refinement state powerhouse of the Taoist Master Mansion in the past. Even though the other party had a true fire spirit refinement realm expert, in the eyes of Qinqingdi, an old true fire spirit refinement realm expert could not stop him. Zhang Xiling furrowed her brows as she watched Emperor Qinqingdi leave. The incident in Qinqingdi was an undeserved disaster for him. After all, he wasn't the one who did it. However, through this incident, Zhang Xiling also saw some of the shortcomings of Longhu Mountain's Celestial Master Abode. It was time to talk to the old Celestial Master to restrain the disciples of Celestial Master Abode. It was inevitable for the disciples of large sects to be arrogant, but the Dao sect advocated purity and inaction. If one's state of mind was filled with obsession, it would not only affect one's own cultivation, but it would also affect the future development of the sect. Just look at the current Chunyang Dao sect. Its obsession was too deep, and its actions were too extreme. The Celestial Master Abode was not like this in the past, but as the Chunyang Dao sect weakened and the true martial sect kept a low profile after Ning Xuanji's disappearance, some people in the Celestial Master Abode really regarded themselves as the leader of the Dao sect and the supreme of the martial arts world. Such a mentality could not be tolerated. Otherwise, it would be like the incident in Chinqing where they offended a powerhouse for no reason. Unfortunately, the brain sometimes had nothing to do with martial arts cultivation. Even though some people had cultivated to the Grandmaster realm, their brains were still a little useless and could not see through these things. At this time, in the field, Chu Xiu and the others were standing on the spot, motionless. Zhang Qingzhen was the number one person of their generation. He had been at the top of the Longhu list for nearly 10 years and no one could surpass him. Now that he had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, he was automatically excluded from the list. Therefore, although this position was given up, it could be said that Zhang Qingzhen had defended this position himself. Therefore, everyone present felt a little complicated. Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen had been fighting for more than 10 years. The two of them, one Taoist and one Buddhist, had fought countless times. Most of the time, Zhang Qingzhen was slightly superior. However, because it was not a battle of life and death, no one knew who would emerge victorious. But now, Zhang Qingzhen was one step ahead of him. This made Zhong Xian, who had always been calm, feel a little upset. On the other hand, Fang Qishao's expression was a little ugly. Of course, given his character, it was not because he was jealous that Zhang Qingzhen had stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, but from today onward, he would probably be scolded by the old guys in Sword King City again. His willfulness would cause trouble, but Zhang Qingzhen's willfulness would cause him to condense the Thunder Golden Core and step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. The gap was too big. For a long time to come, Zhang Qingzhen would still be regarded as his positive example. Everyone looked up at the Dao accumulation that Zhang Qingzhen had dropped in the air. Chu Xiu was the first to attack. The heavenly demon dance in his hand was filled with hatred, and he slashed at Zhong Xian with boundless blood devil qi. Just now, Zhang Qingzhen used them as whetstones to bear the pressure in order to make a breakthrough. However, Chu Xiu and the others had also accumulated the foundation of the oneness of heaven and man realm in that battle. In fact, Chu Xiu even thought that the battle was too short. If it was a little longer, although Chu Xiu could not break through to the martial Dao Grandmaster realm in the battle like Zhang Qingzhen, he could at least push the accumulation of the oneness of heaven and man realm to the peak. Therefore, although Zhang Qingzhen had left, the others were still there. Zhong Xian was a very good opponent. Last time, at Master Tam Yuan's place, Chu Xiu fought with Zhong Xian. Although that battle seemed to be a draw and they were evenly matched, Chu Xiu knew that he had lost. He had tried his best to fight Zhong Xian to a draw, but Zhong Xian still had strength to spare. If it wasn't for Master Tam Yuan's appearance in the end, Chu Xiu would definitely be the loser. Now, Chu Xiu's cultivation had improved further. He was ready to see who was stronger between him and Zhong Xian. Zhong Xian's eyes glowed as he held the bright king's seal in his hand to meet Chu Xiu's saber. However, at the next moment, Chu Xiu could sense a clear battle intent from him. It was obvious that Zhong Xian was thinking the same thing as Chu Xiu. Seeing that Chu Xiu had already started fighting with Zhong Xian, a smile appeared on Ing Bailu's face. "Brother Fang, why don't we spar again?" Fang Qishao pursed his lips and said, "Fighting with you is the most boring." Ing Bailu, the Ying family always likes to hide things. "Can't you show your true strength?" If you had used your full strength just now, perhaps Zhang Qingzhen wouldn't have been able to become a martial Dao Grandmaster. I'm afraid he would have lost. Ying Bailu shook his head and said, some things can't be revealed. Once they are revealed, it will be a hopeless situation. Besides, I didn't hold back just now. No one will hold back against the little celestial master, Zhang Qingzhen. Brother Fang, please enlighten me. As soon as he finished speaking, Ying Bailu did not ask if Fang Qishao agreed or not. Black Qi burst out from his body and condensed into the shape of a black dragon. With an earth-shattering roar, it charged at Fang Qishao. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw that. What's going on with them? They were fighting against Zhang Qingzhen just now, but now they're fighting on their own. I don't understand. I really don't understand. However, some of the older martial Dao masters nodded. There were many geniuses on the Longhu leaderboard in this generation. Although the little celestial master, Zhang Qingzhen, was talented, he could not overshadow the glory of the others. To put it bluntly, the most important thing in the martial Dao lineage was strength. Otherwise, no matter how amazing one's schemes were, they would not be able to withstand a punch that could crush all schemes. Nye Donglu from the morgue of the Longhu leaderboard was also someone like that. However, he was too calculative and neglected his own strength. In the end, he died a violent death. There were many smart people like that in the Jianghu, but unfortunately, there were only a few who could make it to the end. How many of the strongest people who stood at the peak of the Jianghu did not make it to their current position by scheming and scheming? Right now, Chu Xiu and the others did not care about their opponent's background, past grudges, or victory or defeat. They only wanted to hone their strength and fight with all their might in such an occasion where they could gather. That was the right way to go. Of course, for them, this battle was to find a suitable opponent to hone their strength. However, for the people outside, this was also a major reshuffle on the Longhu leaderboard. With Zhang Qingzhen gone, who would be the next first on the Longhu leaderboard? Under normal circumstances, it should be Zhong Xian. However, there were too many variables now, and the biggest one was Chu Xiu. When they fought with Zhang Qingzhen earlier, everyone could already tell that apart from Li Failian, who was always looking for opportunities, the only ones who could pose a fatal threat to Zhang Qingzhen were Chu Xiu, who attacked fiercely and had extremely explosive power. No one had expected Chu Xiu's improvement to be so great. His accumulation of power had already reached a rather shocking level. Even some of the martial Dao masters present were not confident that they could withstand Chu Xiu's sun-changing skill and colorless sealing palm without any pressure. Therefore, after this battle, there would definitely be a major reshuffle on the Longhu leaderboard. Who would ascend to the top would depend on this battle. Chu Xiu, Zhong Xian, Fang Qishao, and Ying Bailu fought separately. However, Li Failian just stood at the side and watched for a while before he directly retreated and stood at the back to watch the battle from a safe distance. It was not that he did not want to fight, but Li Failian had already attacked 9 times. The last attack was to risk his life. Now, he could only recover his strength and watch the battle from the side. Everyone present was an expert, so they could naturally see Li Failian's strength. Although Li Failian had indeed posed a great threat to Zhang Qingzhen earlier, his fighting style was still incomparable to Chu Xiu's. He only had the strength to attack 10 times. If he could not kill his opponent with the first 9 attacks, he would risk his life with the 10th attack. In terms of real combat power, there was no doubt that Chu Xiu was above Li Failian. As for the Daoist connotation floating above the 4 of them, no one dared to snatch it. They just let it float there. This thing did not belong to a single person, but it was the trophy of Chu Xiu and the other 4. If anyone dared to take it at this time, the consequences would be very miserable, so no one wanted to try. Chapter 585. Chu Xiu had only fought with Zhong Xian once, but he had a very good understanding of Zhong Xian's martial arts. It could be said that Zhongxian's martial arts were of the Buddhist lineage, or rather, the most outstanding work of the Great Light Temple lineage. He had already displayed the martial arts of the Great Light Temple lineage to the extreme. Zhongxian had an incomparably powerful physical body, and one could not find any weakness in his entire body. The only way to defeat him was to defeat him head-on with strength. However, in terms of strength, how many people in this world could compare to Zhongxian? In the end, the one who would lose would definitely be you. Therefore, this time, when Chu Xiu attacked Zhongxian, he had already made up his mind from the beginning. He would not give Zhongxian the last chance to exhaust himself. The demonic blade with boundless hatred slashed down. Putting aside the strength of the blade, the hatred had already seeped into the blade intent. It was even similar to the power of the blade of hatred that Chu Xiu used directly. However, it did not have the mystical ability of absorbing hatred as the blade of hatred did, but it could still arouse the hatred in Zhongxian's heart. As the blade fell, Zhongxian formed a Buddhist seal with his hands, and the light of Buddha shone brightly in his palms. He actually directly clamped down on Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance. His gang qi erupted, and in an instant, all the demonic qi on the heavenly demon dance was dispersed. Moreover, the hatred in Chu Xiu's blade intent did not cause too much harm to Zhongxian, because there was actually no hatred in Zhongxian's heart. Zhongxian had cultivated in the Great Light Temple since he was a child. No one knew what he had experienced to cultivate to this stage, and no one knew how Zhongxian had developed such a character. However, since Chu Xiu's blade was ineffective, it proved that Zhongxian really did not have any hatred in his heart. Although it was somewhat unbelievable, it was the truth. This had already been thought of by the master refiner of the Black Demon Tower when he was forging the 7 demon blades. Greed, anger, obsession, hate, love, evil, and desire. As long as one was human, they would have 7 emotions and 6 desires, and would be targeted by the 7 demon blades. The blade of hatred was useless, but the other blades might not necessarily work. If a person didn't even have 7 emotions and 6 desires, it could only mean that the other party was no longer human. Regardless of whether the other party had become a god or a demon, it was not something that he could resist. There was no hatred in Zhongxian's heart. Chu Xiu's saber could only make Zhongxian's mind go blank for a moment. In the next moment, he had already reacted. He gripped Chu Xiu's long saber tightly in his hand and burst forth with strength, wanting to twist and break Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance. However, although Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was a 6th transformation precious weapon, it was forged with the foundation of a divine weapon, and it also had the heavenly demon order in it. Even if Zhongxian's body could withstand a divine weapon, he still could not break the heavenly demon dance. In the next moment, Chu Xiu had already retreated. However, at the same time, he performed the great skill of extinguishing sky, extinguishing earth, and soul transfer. His powerful mental strength surged toward Zhongxian. The 9 forms of soul engulfing was an extremely sensitive essence soul secret technique, and Chu Xiu dared not use it in public. Therefore, he simply used his mental strength to attack Zhongxian's mind. The swastika symbol rose on Zhongxian's forehead and offset most of the mental strength. However, some of it still seeped into Zhongxian's mind, causing him to groan uncontrollably. The gang qi around him was trembling, and he seemed to be unable to control it. At this moment, the Buddha flame around Chu Xiu rose, and the shadow of Vairocana appeared behind Chu Xiu. The light of Buddha illuminated the entire hall. At this moment, Chu Xiu looked even more like a Buddhist expert than Zhongxian. Vairocana's palm landed, and a powerful aura erupted. The power caused the expressions of some martial Tao masters to change slightly. Previously, Chu Xiu had used the great skill of changing sun to deal with Zhang Qingzhen. Given Zhang Qingzhen's strength, he could only resist it with the thunder talisman under Chu Xiu's great skill of changing sun, and he was even blasted into the ground by Chu Xiu. Zhongxian's defense was much stronger than Zhang Qingzhen's. He formed a seal with his hand, and the Buddha light around him turned into a quiet moonlight. The pharmacist glazed light King Buddha Dharma rose behind Zhongxian, and a seal landed, clashing head-on with Chu Xiu's great skill of changing Sunday. However, under the powerful power of the great skill of changing sun, Zhongxian was forced to retreat step by step. Although he was not injured, he was already at a disadvantage. Chu Xiu's expression did not change. Although he had the upper hand now, he could see that Zhongxian was still uninjured, and his strength was still as strong as ever. Chu Xiu took a step forward and boundless Buddhist light gathered in his palm. Sumarum mustard seed, life and death of the universe, colorless fixed palm imprint. As Chu Xiu's imprint landed, everything in its path was disintegrated and strangled. The Buddha light was extinguished, and even the pharmacist glazed light King Buddha Dharma behind Zhongxian was completely shattered. The great skill of changing sun, coupled with the formless sealing palm imprint, was so powerful that even Chu Xiu did not expect it. If Master Tam Yuan had used it when he was at his peak in the past, he would have the power to shake heaven and earth. Moreover, seeing that Zhongxian was defeated by Chu Xiu's series of horrifying attacks, the people present suddenly burst into an uproar. After all, he was Zhongxian, who was ranked second on the Longhu leaderboard. However, he did not seem to be able to retaliate against Chu Xiu's attacks at all. The gap between them was too great. Could it be that he had exhausted too much of his energy in the battle with Zhang Chengzhen? At this time, Su Xing did not even care about snatching the Daoist connotation. Instead, he stared straight at the battlefield. He could not help but want to attack. Zhongxian could not be defeated. To the Great Light Temple, Zhongxian was their Great Light Temple's face. Previously, Zhongxian was ranked below Zhang Chengzhen. This was not a big deal. After all, he was also a stunning figure that only appeared once in 1,000 years in the Dao sect. The Dao sect and the Buddhist sect were always competing, and both sides had their wins and losses. Moreover, Zhongxian was not too far behind Zhang Chengzhen. However, Chu Xiu was different. Zhongxian could not lose to Chu Xiu. The disciple that the Great Light Temple had painstakingly nurtured had lost to a warrior of humble origins. Even if Zhang Chengzhen had left the Longhu list, Zhongxian could not become number one. If Zhongxian really lost, these comments would definitely spread throughout the underworld. However, Su Xing held back and did not attack in the end. If he did, the Great Light Temple would lose even more face. Interfering with a fight between juniors. One could afford to fight but could not afford to lose. This kind of reputation was not good. Moreover, Guan Siyu was watching. If he dared to openly interrupt a fight between juniors, not only would he be despised by others, but Guan Siyu would also not stand idly by. At this time, on Zhongxian's side, although he had been crushed by Chu Xiu, Zhongxian's own strength was extremely strong, so he was not injured. However, the more he fought, the brighter Zhongxian's eyes became. Although no one could see the expression on Zhongxian's statue-like face, Zhongxian was currently furious. In such a long time, almost no one could suppress him to this extent. Even when he had fought one-on-one with Zhang Chengzhen in the past, it had not happened. Although this did not mean that Chu Xiu was stronger than him or Zhang Chengzhen, in terms of explosive power, Chu Xiu's endless miraculous martial arts techniques were indeed more difficult to deal with than Zhang Chengzhen's. If he fought rationally, Zhongxian could just passively defend and wait until Chu Xiu exhausted 90% of his strength before attacking. He would almost certainly win. However, at this time, Zhongxian's heart was already burning with rage. He did not want to defend anymore. Zhongxian was human, not a god. He also had emotions and desires. At this time, Chu Xiu could not use the seven-demon saber. If he could use the seven-demon saber, the angry saber would undoubtedly be the most useful for the current Zhongxian. Endless Buddha's aura condensed around Zhongxian. The Buddha's aura burned fiercely and turned into Buddha's flame. As Zhong Xian formed the Wisdom King seal in his hand, a four-faced, eight-armed Wisdom King shadow appeared amidst the raging flames of the Buddha light. It had a ferocious and terrifying expression, and on its 8 arms, there were all sorts of weapons formed from Gang Qi, and it attacked Chu Xiu. The Sky Demon Dance was held in Chu Xiu's hand. The power of Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique was raised to the extreme by Chu Xiu. The qi and blood around his body were boiling and burning. The Golden Buddha's flame flowed and actually plated the Sky Demon Dance with a layer of Golden Buddha's flame. As the saber slashed down, the Buddha's flame carried a monstrous demonic energy. At the same time, Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air was also displayed to the extreme by him. Even though Zhong Xian's angry Wisdom King had the power of 8 arms, it was completely blocked by Chu Xiu's saber. The Buddha's light and devil's flame exploded and danced. The power was almost comparable to the scene when the 5 people besieged Zhangchengzhen. Su Xing's face was extremely gloomy. To the warriors of the Great Light Temple, cultivating both devil and Buddha was simply an insult. However, he could not find anything wrong with Chu Xiu being able to cultivate Buddhist martial arts to this level. This was because Chu Xiu was the successor of holy monk Tan Yuan. Master Tam Yuan's reputation in the underworld was well known. Even if his successor cultivated demonic arts, he would not be a member of the demonic path. This was a halo. Even if the people of the underworld did not believe in Chu Xiu, they believed in Master Tam Yuan. At this moment, Chu Wuji was watching the battle between Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian. He raised his eyebrows and whispered to Mr. Liu, "This kid is not simple. Everyone thinks that he is a dual cultivator of Taoism and Buddhism. In fact, he is a dual cultivator of Taoism, Buddhism and demonic Tao." Mr. Liu said in surprise, "He has also cultivated Taoist martial arts?" Mr. Liu knew Chu Xiu better, but he did not take the initiative to ask Chu Xiu what kind of martial arts he had cultivated. After all, this kind of thing was a taboo. However, in the outside world, Chu Xiu had not taken the initiative to reveal any strong Taoist martial arts. Chu Wuji laughed and said, "It's normal that you can't see it. Taoist martial arts are righteous and peaceful, and the most important thing is the foundation." This kid used the Taoist foundation as his bones and built a very solid foundation, which is why he has such a cultivation today. If I'm not wrong, the first martial art he cultivated should be from the Taoist lineage. He used the righteous and peaceful Taoist method to harmonize the power of the Devil Buddha. Whether it was unintentional or intentional, this method not only made the 3 kinds of power in his body reach a delicate balance, but also can even complement each other. This kid is a talent. His potential is no less than that of the little celestial master who just stepped into the martial Tao Grand Master realm. Mr. Liu looked at Chu Wuji in surprise. He did not expect that Chu Wuji would give such a high evaluation of Chu Xiu. It should be known that Chu Wuji was actually a genius. In the past, he was also ranked in the top 5 on the Longhu list. Now, he was the most promising martial Tao Grand Master in the Yinma clan to step into the true fire spiritual refinement realm. In the entire Yinma clan, there were not many people who could be regarded as worthy by Chu Wuji. Chapter 586. In the main hall, the intensity of the battle between Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian had even far exceeded the battle between some martial Tao masters. The intensity made everyone present feel a little scared. Both of them were really angry. There was no benefit, no hatred, just a battle for victory. Zhong Xian's Wisdom King's wrath, Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique, Buddha's flame aura was burning fiercely. As the two of them fought, the bronze pillars around them actually began to crack, and the entire main hall began to shake. Seeing this scene, Daoist Guangning hurriedly said loudly, "You two be careful, if you continue to fight like this, the entire main hall will be destroyed by you." Normally, not to mention the battle between two Unity of Heaven realm martial artists, even a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse wouldn't be able to destroy the 3 pristine temples branch hall. However, the 3 pristine temples branch hall had already experienced the baptism of an ancient great calamity, and the external formation was also destroyed by Daoist Guangning and the others. Without the protection of the formation, it was actually already very fragile. It was just that when these martial Dao masters fought before, they only fought for the Dao accumulation. They mainly fought for the Dao accumulation, not to kill each other, so it wasn't too intense. However, just now Zhang Qingjin was fighting fiercely with the 5 people, and now Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian were fighting to such an extent, the entire 3 pristine temples branch hall was already a bit overwhelmed. However, at this time, Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian's battle had already reached such an intense degree, even if they were asked to stop, they couldn't do it, so how could they care about other things? The Buddha's light in Zhong Xian's eyes surged, and the 4-faced and 8-armed Wisdom King's shadow behind him completely faded, but it evolved into the immovable Wisdom King's shadow. Guard the heart, save all living beings. Hearing much and not moving, suppress evil and kill demons. The immovable Wisdom King was the head of the 5 Wisdom Kings, and Zhong Xian's immovable Wisdom King seal had already achieved 90% of its charm. Finally, the Wisdom King's shadow was directly imprinted in Zhong Xian's body, causing dense Buddhist Sanskrit to appear around his body. As the Wisdom King, Zhong Xian used himself as the carrier to completely fill the last bit of charm. With a loud bang, Zhong Xian directly resisted Chu Xiu's demonic dance with his body. His body was full of flaws, and he didn't even need to use heaven's sun-gazing technique to investigate. Zhong Xian gripped the blade tightly with both hands. Chu Xiu's power exploded to the extreme, but Zhong Xian, with the support of the immovable Wisdom King's power, was even stronger than Chu Xiu's, making the demonic dance unable to break free. Chu Xiu could clearly sense that his Buddha flame qi was burning, and the powerful force that was exchanged for it was something that Chu Xiu couldn't take head-on right now. Right, Chu Xiu, and Xiu's body, Chen, and Devil King, Xiu, and Shui, and Iming, holding the saber in his left hand, Zhong Xian pressed his right hand down on the Chu Xiu seal. It was as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were collapsing. Chu Xiu's eyes flashed with killing intent. He loosened his saber and retreated, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he gathered his killing intent in his fist and used the annihilating heaven and earth annihilating oblivion killing fist to clash with Zhong Xian. The 2 fists collided, and the ground on both sides shattered inch by inch. The bronze that was reinforced by the formation was even blasted into slag. Chen Qingdi, who was at the back, rubbed his chin. He could sense from Chu Xiu's punch that there was actually a part of his fist intent. Although it was only a small part, with the addition of this trace of fist intent, Chu Xiu's fist had a spirit, and its power was enough to multiply. Chen Qingdi vaguely remembered that he had only punched once in front of Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu had actually remembered his fist intent and displayed it to a degree that was not inferior to his disciple Xia Shaolu's. It must be known that Xia Shaolu was his direct disciple. Chu Xiu had only seen him attack once, but Xia Shaolu had seen him attack countless times. Moreover, Chen Qingdi had deliberately displayed his fist intent martial path in front of Xia Shaolu, breaking it down and explaining it step by step. This allowed Xia Shaolu to cultivate it to the point where it was 30% similar in form and 10% similar in spirit. It was just a bluff. But now, when Chu Xiu used it, it was 30% similar in form and 10% similar in spirit. This immediately gave Chen Qingdi a feeling that people should die when compared to people, and goods should be thrown away when compared to goods. He even wanted to drag Xia Shaolu over and beat him up to vent his anger. Moreover, Chen Qingdi was not only thinking about it, he really intended to do so. Looking around, Chen Qingdi found that Xia Shaolu was watching the fight with Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng. He could not help but coldly snort and did not make a move, giving Xia Shaolu some face in front of his friends. Xia Shaolu, who was seriously watching the fight between Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian, suddenly felt a chill on his back. He touched his head, looked around, and did not seem to be in any danger. Who wanted to harm him? At this time, on the battlefield, Zhongxian had condensed the power of the immovable Wisdom King into his body. Under the intense burning of the Buddha flame aura qi, Zhongxian felt an unparalleled and terrifying power, even suppressing Chu Xiu, forcing Chu Xiu to abandon his blade. The situation was instantly reversed. Seeing this scene, Su Xing also let out a long breath. Losing to Zhang Chungjin was a loss, but as long as he did not lose to Chu Xiu, Zhongxian would still be number 1 on the Longhu list. But before Su Xing could finish his breath, the situation on the battlefield had already changed. Other than not using the unique martial arts of Lin Ye's identity, Chu Xiu had already exerted his strength to the extreme. Zhongxian was a very good opponent, because his martial arts were very similar to Chu Xiu's in a certain aspect. They were both firm and imposing, incomparably violent. Right now, Zhongxian was condensing the power of the immovable Wisdom King, while Chu Xiu was operating the Great Sun Changing technique. Both sides' strength had been raised to the extreme, and they did not even have time to think. They were both subconsciously attacking, using brute force. Chu Xiu himself was also immersed in this state. Every punch and kick was based on instinct, combat instinct. Subconsciously, Chu Xiu used the fast and slow 9 words formula. Actually, the power of the fast and slow 9 words formula was already somewhat unable to keep up with Chu Xiu's strength. If he used a single seal, he would definitely be crushed by Zhongxian. But in the end, Chu Xiu's attacks became faster and faster. The Great Vajra seal, the Wisdom Fist seal, the Perfect Aquarius seal, and other seals were used. Gradually, Chu Xiu's seals began to blur. It was not that his seals were not accurate, but the speed at which they were being formed was too fast. When the speed at which he was forming the seals reached the extreme, Chu Xiu suddenly produced a seal that he had never used before. In an instant, 9 streams of power gathered and did not dissipate. Like a wheel, they connected in front of Chu Xiu and emitted a deep Buddhist light. Chu Xiu's eyes were slightly closed. Around him, there was the sound of Cloud Dan music, which could even make people intoxicated. Chu Xiu was dressed in black and his black hair was blown by the Gang Qi in the 9-seal wheel. Although everyone knew that he was a ruthless person, at this moment, Chu Xiu gave people a feeling that he was a Buddha. Su Xing looked at Chu Xiu with a black face. This guy could be said to be the second person he wanted to get rid of since he entered Xiaofang Tian. The first was Lin Yi, who had seriously injured him with 1 slash, a little devil cultivated by the Immortal clan. And this Chu Xiu in front of him, he had first cultivated both the devil and Buddha, and now he had cultivated a tantric technique to such an extent. This made Su Xing very unhappy. The Great Light Temple was considered a branch of the Zen sect among the branches of the Buddhist sect. Although there were many techniques that were related to the Tantric sect, most of them were Tantric sect techniques that had been assimilated. However, what Chu Xiu displayed was an extremely authentic Tantric sect technique. Su Xing, an ancient martial art practitioner from the Great Light Temple, naturally loathed it. At this moment, in the field, Zhongxian's eyes were shining brightly. He did not know what martial arts Chu Xiu was using, but his intuition told him that Chu Xiu was very dangerous at this moment. The immovable Ming King seal fell, and in an instant, the surrounding qi of heaven and earth gave off a violent sonic boom. Layers of power exploded, like shaking mountains and shattering the earth. At this moment, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly opened, and endless light sprinkled down. As the seal in Chu Xiu's hands fell, in an instant, the 9 seals merged into one, unparalleled in heaven and earth. This was the performance of the fast and slow 9 words formula at its peak. The 9 words formula cycled, growing and multiplying endlessly. Finally, the 9 seals merged into one, and the power was earth-shattering. The 9 words formula smashed down one after another, golden light bloomed, and Zhong Xian was forced to retreat step by step. The fast and slow 9 words formula was named fast and slow, but when the 9 seals were combined, there were thousands of changes. When the 9 seals merged into one, the complexity of the power was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. For this technique, Chu Xiu had started cultivating 1 seal at a time, and in the end, he had displayed each seal to the extreme. Finally, when the 9 seals merged into one, it could be considered to have achieved great success. Zhong Xian's immovable Ming King seal could withstand one type of power, but it could not withstand this ever-changing combination of power. The power of the Ming King around him continued to collapse, and finally, with a loud bang, it completely shattered. With a loud bang, the light of the 9 seals roulette bloomed to the extreme, and Zhong Xian's body was directly smashed into the ground. Countless bronze fragments exploded, and a stream of blood flowed from Zhong Xian's mouth. Su Xing's face instantly darkened. No one present had expected that Zhong Xian would actually lose to Chu Xiu. He had fought with Zhang Chengzhen on the Longhu leaderboard for more than 10 years. Not only did he not defeat Zhang Chengzhen, but Zhang Chengzhen had also stepped into the martial path Grandmaster realm before him. In the end, he had lost to Chu Xiu, and his ranking was lower than Chu Xiu's. However, at this time, Chu Xiu did not feel good either. His face was pale, and anyone could see that it was abnormally pale. 9 seals as one. It seemed like Chu Xiu had only used one move, but in fact, every time the 9 seals roulette rotated, it was equivalent to Chu Xiu continuously blasting out the complete fast and slow 9 words formula. That was why the power was so varied. The fast and slow 9 words formula had already consumed a lot of energy. Normally, it would not be a problem for Chu Xiu to use more than 10 seals. However, just now, how many seals did Chu Xiu use? Dozens or hundreds of seals? Even he couldn't count it clearly anymore. In the bronze pit, Zhong Xian struggled to get up. His eyes were still shining, and he wanted to fight again. But in the instant that he crawled up, the entire hall suddenly began to shake violently. Large pieces of bronze fell down, and with the support of the remnant formation, they weighed over 10,000 caddies. One of the 5 Chi's origin stage martial artists who was caught off guard tried to resist, but he was forcefully smashed into meat paste by these fragments. Chapter 587. The bronze hall collapsed. It wasn't just the entire hall that collapsed, but the arrays within it as well. Although the ancient arrays had been damaged by the great tribulation of heaven and earth, some of their power still remained. The unlucky guy who was crushed to death earlier was proof of that. Thus, no one was in the mood to continue fighting. They wanted to end the fight quickly, turning to flee. Chu Xiu, who was the closest to the Dao accumulation, grabbed it, put it into the secret space box, and ran away. He had exhausted too much of his power. Even if Zhong Xian wanted to continue fighting, he didn't want to. If he did, he would be fighting Zhong Xian with his life on the line. At the same time, Fang Qi Xiao and Ing Bailu stopped fighting at the same time. The fight between the two of them was very exciting. However, Chu Xiu had stolen the limelight, so no one paid attention to it. Even so, Fang Qi Xiao still had the upper hand in this fight. The sword of karma was really unsolvable. The number of ways to break it could be counted on one's fingers. Another way was to be like Chu Xiu, who was also proficient in the Tao of karma. The two of them were competing in the understanding of the Tao of karma. Another way was to be like Zhong Xian, who used brute force to break all things. His defensive and offensive power were extremely shocking. It didn't matter if it was karma or reincarnation. Only by surpassing him in power could one truly hurt him. Just like how Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian fought earlier. The last one was even more difficult. Earlier, Zhang Chengzhen used extreme speed and subtle control of power to break the Tao of karma. This was a technique that ordinary people couldn't do. However, Fang Qixiao knew that even though he had the upper hand, Ying Bailu wasn't going all out. The Ying clan of Shangshui River was best at hiding their strength. It was impossible for Ying Bailu to reveal all his trump cards until it was a real life and death battle. At this time, 7th young Master Fang looked around and murmured, "Where's Lin Kaiyun? Where the hell did he go?" Although they were both from Sword King City, Fang Qixiao loathed Lin Kaiyun. This fellow was too narrow-minded. Back in Sword King City, Fang Qixiao didn't put Lin Kaiyun in his eyes at all. As a result, Lin Kaiyun targeted him at every turn, treating him as an imaginary enemy and dreaming of surpassing him one day. Not only that, Lin Kaiyun also spoke ill of him in secret. However, the other party was from Sword King City, after all. Considering that they were from the same sect, Fang Qixiao couldn't just ignore him. Although he said that Lin Kaiyun was dead, he couldn't just watch Lin Kaiyun get into trouble. However, at this time, Fang Qixiao did not know that Lin Kaiyun had actually been at the entrance of the main hall all along, looking at Chu Xiu, Zhang Qingzhen, and the others with jealousy, and even Fang Qixiao. Not everyone was qualified to snatch the Dao accumulation. At the very least, one had to have the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm. Lin Kaiyun was not qualified, and he was not an idiot. Therefore, he just stayed at the entrance and watched the battle. When he saw how heroic the little celestial master, Zhang Qingzhen, was when he fought against 5 people alone, Lin Kaiyun's heart surged with emotions, but more than that, he felt jealousy. Why wasn't he the one who fought against 5 pugilistic world's elites alone, gathering wind and thunder to step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm? Not to mention becoming Zhang Qingzhen, if he could become one of the 5 people personally challenged by Zhang Qingzhen, it would be enough for him to become famous in pugilistic world. Being challenged by Zhang Qingzhen proved that they stood at the peak of the same realm and had the strength to put pressure on Zhang Qingzhen. This was a kind of recognition of strength. After this battle, not only Zhang Qingzhen, but also Chu Xiu and the other 4 people's brilliance would not be overshadowed. Unfortunately, Lin Kaiyun could only look up to this glory. How he wished he was also one of the 5 people, but he was not. He could only watch helplessly as the 7th young Master Fang, who was from the same faction as him and had never looked serious, swaggered around and was praised by others. The flames of jealousy in his heart almost ignited Lin Kaiyun. At the same time, a wave of resentment rose in his heart. He resented the heavens for being unfair. In Sword King City, 7th young Master Fang spent his days either drinking or strolling around in a frivolous manner. He was never serious, but the seniors of the sect doted on him. No matter what absurd things he did, the seniors of Sword King City would only reprimand him. They didn't even punish him. What about him? There were 24 hours in a day, and he spent 20 hours practicing his sword. If his progress was slow, he would be punished by the elders and be told to learn from Fang Qixiao. But what was the result? Why couldn't he be compared to Fang Qixiao? He worked so hard, but why couldn't he be compared to Fang Qixiao? If the heavens weren't unfair, then what was? At this moment, Lin Kaiyun's jealousy towards Fang Qixiao had escalated into hatred. However, reason told him that he couldn't do anything to Fang Qixiao. Fang Qixiao was the future of Sword King City and its successor. If he dared to show any malice towards Fang Qixiao, he would definitely be punished. Moreover, with his current strength, he couldn't pose a threat to Fang Qixiao except for some conspiracies. Therefore, Lin Kaiyun turned his eyes and looked maliciously at Chu Xiu, who had just obtained the Dao accumulation and was fleeing towards the exit. His hatred for Chu Xiu was even stronger than his hatred for Fang Qixiao. It was because of Chu Xiu that his state of mind had been damaged, causing him to be depressed for such a long time and delaying his cultivation. Otherwise, he would have entered the unity of heaven and man realm long ago. Moreover, the relationship between Chu Xiu and Fang Qixiao was quite good. This made Lin Kaiyun direct his jealousy and hatred towards Fang Qixiao onto Chu Xiu. Of course, the most important thing was that Lin Kaiyun now believed that he could touch Chu Xiu. Although Lin Kaiyun's strength wasn't that great, it was only when compared to outstanding geniuses like Chu Xiu. In fact, compared to most martial artists of the same age, his strength was quite good. Otherwise, Sword King City wouldn't have nurtured him like this. Although Sword King City mainly nurtured Fang Qishao, Lin Kaiyun's treatment was second only to Fang Qishao's. The seniors of Sword King City thought that when Fang Qishao took over Sword King City in the future, he would need a few subordinates who could handle the situation. Lin Kaiyun was one such person. However, the seniors of Sword King City didn't expect that this differential treatment would make a narrow-minded person like Lin Kaiyun hate Fang Qishao out of jealousy. No matter what, Lin Kaiyun was also a disciple carefully nurtured by a major sect. He could still see Chu Xiu's current state. Even if Chu Xiu won against Zhong Xian, his strength and stamina were exhausted to the extreme. It was even more serious than Zhong Xian, who vomited blood. Chu Xiu was now an arrow at the end of its flight, and Guan Xiyu was also far away. Therefore, it could be said that Chu Xiu was at his weakest. If Lin Kaiyun didn't seize this opportunity, he might not be able to take revenge for the rest of his life. Moreover, if he killed Chu Xiu and obtained the Dao accumulation, he would also have the opportunity to surpass Fang Qishao in the future. However, although Lin Kaiyun's heart was filled with jealousy and hatred, he also knew that he couldn't kill Chu Xiu alone. It was more likely that he would be killed instead. Therefore, Lin Kaiyun ran to the side where there was a group of people watching the battle. These people were the Azure Wave Sword sect's martial artists who entered the small mortal sky first. They were led by Azure Wave Sword sect's eldest disciple, Dou Guangchen. Previously, Lu Zongyuan stopped Dou Guangchen from bringing people in because he had entered the small mortal sky before and knew the dangers. In the end, Dou Guangchen didn't choose to listen to Lu Zongyuan in order to seize the initiative. He insisted on bringing people into the small mortal sky, but the outcome was extremely miserable. For the past few days, Dou Guangchen led the other Azure Wave Sword sect disciples to explore the ruins. As a result, the other disciples were too weak, and even he could barely protect himself. Therefore, this led to the death of nearly half of the Azure Wave Sword sect's martial artists. Dou Guangchen learned his lesson and brought his disciples to gather herbs in peace. Once they found them, they would consume them in the small mortal sky. It was considered a secluded cultivation. As a result, the heavens seemed to be going against Dou Guangchen. Along the way, Dou Guangchen didn't take the initiative to provoke others, but there were others who found him an eyesore and wanted to find trouble with him. For the past few days, Dou Guangchen felt like he had aged by 10 years. Traces of regret arose in his heart. Lin Kaiyun knew that his strength wasn't enough, but Azure Wave Sword sect's eldest disciple, Dou Guangchen, wasn't weak. Quickly arriving at Dou Guangchen's side, Lin Kaiyun cupped his hands and said, "Does Brother Dou recognize me?" In fact, in terms of seniority, Dou Guangchen was one generation older than Lin Kaiyun. However, Lin Kaiyun couldn't always address him as senior. This way, their statuses would be different. Dou Guangchen frowned. "Sword King City's Lin Kaiyun? What do you want?" After all, Lin Kaiyun was once ranked top 20 on the Dragon Tiger rankings and still had some reputation in the underworld. Therefore, Dou Guangchen recognized him with a single glance. There wasn't much time, and Lin Kaiyun didn't have time to build a friendship with Dou Guangchen. He went straight to the point. "Brother Dou, I know about the grudge between your Azure Wave Sword sect and Chu Xiu. Now that you have seen Chu Xiu's strength, if you don't eliminate him today, he will definitely eradicate your Azure Wave Sword sect in the future. Now that Chu Xiu fought with Zhong Xian, he has already overexerted himself. Furthermore, Guan Xiyu isn't by his side. Right now, Chu Xiu can be said to be at his weakest. You and I will join forces and behead him to avenge the hatred in our hearts. What do you think?" Dou Guangchen heard this and instantly jumped in fright. He quickly said, "Are you crazy? A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. It's not like you didn't see Chu Xiu's prowess just now. If we dare to take advantage of his misfortune with our strength, this is simply courting death. Although Chu Xiu was an enemy, Dou Guangquan couldn't deny Chu Xiu's strength. In the same rank, Chu Xiu was almost at the peak state. A casual attack from him might not even be able to withstand it. Right now, only young elites like Zhong Xian who had accumulated formidable strength at the unity of heaven and man realm and some older martial Dao masters were qualified to be Chu Xiu's opponents. Dou Guangquan didn't want to admit it, but he and Chu Xiu were indeed people from two different worlds. Chapter 588. Dou Guangquan wasn't an idiot, he had a grudge with Chu Xiu. The entire Azure Wave Sword sect had a grudge with Chu Xiu, but this didn't mean he would blindly throw away his life. Lin Kaiyun's eyes revealed a hint of coldness. Of course our strength isn't enough, but I am the direct disciple of the Sword King city. How can I not have any preparations for this trip to the minor heaven? I brought the Sword King city's secret treasure, the blood-dripping sword. This item seizes the soul upon contact with blood and is a first-class murderous weapon. Apart from consuming a large amount of essence blood, it can only be used as a trump card and has almost no flaws. My strength isn't enough to use the blood-dripping sword to its full potential. Brother Dou, you are a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm. Under the full activation of your qi and blood, it is enough to display 80% of the blood-dripping sword's power. It can even threaten some weaker martial Dao masters. When Chu Xiu was at his peak, this blood-dripping sword had no effect on him, but now that his strength is exhausted, with you providing the qi and blood, I will control the blood-dripping sword and execute the sword art. We will definitely be able to kill Chu Xiu. Seeing that Dou Guangquan was still hesitating, Lin Kaiyun quickly persuaded, Brother Dou. Think about it, this is your only chance. If you lose this opportunity, don't mention you wanting to kill Chu Xiu. Even if your Azure Wave Sword sect master Lu Gongyuan came, he won't be able to kill Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's potential is amazing, he will only get stronger and stronger, making you feel more and more despair. If Brother Dou really doesn't care about the future safety of the Azure Wave Sword sect, then pretend I didn't say anything and I will deal with him myself. You don't have to worry about me tricking you. If I don't have a certain degree of confidence, do you think I will make a move? Lin Kaiyun said so much, but Dou Guangquan didn't respond. What truly made Dou Guangquan's heart palpitate was Lin Kaiyun's words about the safety of the Azure Wave Sword sect. Dou Guangquan was raised by Lu Gongxian, he grew up in the Azure Wave Sword sect since he was young. To him, the Azure Wave Sword sect was like his home. Back then, Lu Gongxian had decided to nurture Shen Bai with all his might instead of his eldest disciple. It would be a lie if Dou Guangquan did not feel the slightest bit of jealousy and unwillingness in his heart. But for the sake of the Azure Billow Sword sect's future and the benefits of the Azure Billow Sword sect, he, Dou Guangquan, was willing to be wronged. He was willing to pretend to be the bad guy in front of Shen Bai and give him pressure. It didn't matter if he died, but what Dou Guangquan was truly worried about was the Azure Water Sword sect's future. Although Lu Gongxian had said that Shen Bai was not crippled and that he was still in seclusion, as long as he could come out smoothly, he would definitely soar into the sky. Dou Guangquan had naturally heard of the legends of the Azure Water Sword sect's back mountain. After so many years, he had never heard of any Azure Water Sword sect ancestor who went into the rear mountains for a life and death seclusion to successfully exit and soar into the sky. It wasn't that Dou Guangquan didn't trust Shen Bai, but the probability was too low. Right now, Dou Guangquan was watching as Chu Xiu flaunted his prowess in front of so many experts and even defeated Zhong Xian. All of this made Dou Guangquan feel threatened. The current Chu Xiu already had this kind of strength. When the day came when he was promoted to Martial Dao Master and their Azure Water Sword sect was gradually declining, if Chu Xiu remembered this feud, his Azure Water Sword sect would be at the mercy of others. But just as Dou Guangquan was about to agree, he suddenly paused and stared at Lin Kaiyun. He spoke in a deep voice, "You are a disciple of the Sword King City. You can kill Chu Xiu because you have the protection of the Sword King City. But if I kill Chu Xiu now, the Guanzhong torture room will definitely not let my Azure Water Sword sect off. When my master was young, he might not be afraid of that Guan Siyu, but now, my master is already old. If I deal with Chu Xiu now, I might be able to kill a future trouble, but it will also put my Azure Water Sword sect in a dead end." Seeing that Chu Xiu was getting closer to the door, Lin Kaiyun couldn't care about anything else. He shouted in a low voice, "With my Sword King City protecting you, what are you afraid of? No matter how strong the Guanzhong torture room is, can they be stronger than my Sword King City? Brother Do, if you don't prepare now, it will be too late. You only have two choices now, trust me or not. With my status in the Sword King City, don't you feel assured?" Regarding the internal affairs of the Sword King City, Do Guangchen didn't know, even most outsiders didn't know. In any case, in their opinion, Lin Kaiyun was an existence that was second only to Fang Qishao. In the Sword King City, Lin Kaiyun definitely had a high status and might be able to protect his Azure Water Sword sect. Therefore, Do Guangchen could only take a gamble. In any case, the result was the same for him. If he killed Chu Xiu now, he would have to face the revenge of the Guanzhong torture room. However, there was a certain chance that the Sword King City would protect his Azure Water Sword sect. If it was dragged to the future, Chu Xiu might personally come to the Azure Water Sword sect to settle this grudge. With Chu Xiu's ruthless character, the Azure Water Sword sect would most likely be annihilated. Since it was a gamble, Do Guangchen chose the former. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "What should I do now?" Hearing Do Guangchen's words, the corner of Lin Kaiyun's mouth immediately revealed a trace of a gloomy smile. In fact, in the Sword King City, Lin Kaiyun's treatment was only second to Fang Qishao. It was true, and Lin Kaiyun didn't lie. However, he didn't tell Do Guangchen that if they were talking about 10 points, then Fang Qishao would get 9 points, and he would only get half a point. The other disciples of the Sword King City would get the last half point. Lin Kaiyun might be second to Fang Qishao, but the treatment was like heaven and earth. But Lin Kaiyun dared to guarantee that even if he really killed Chu Xiu and Guan Siyu came looking for trouble, the Sword King City wouldn't hand him over. This was actually the Sword King City's true style, extremely overbearing. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, it wouldn't be Lin Kaiyun's fault. Of course, the Sword King City could protect him, but Lin Kaiyun wasn't sure if he could protect the Azure Water Sword sect. Seeing that Chu Xiu was approaching, Lin Kaiyun took out a blood-red longsword from the spatial secret box and said to Do Guangchen, "Burn your essence blood and pour it into the blood-drop sword. The more, the better. The faster, the better." Do Guangchen didn't delay and immediately chose to burn his essence blood. A large amount of extremely pure blood mist poured into Lin Kaiyun's blood-drop sword. Stimulated by the power of qi and blood, the blood-drop sword immediately blossomed with a blood-red radiance. The killing intent trembled, and even Lin Kaiyun felt like he couldn't control it. This blood-drop sword used to be the divine weapon of a demon Dao tyrant. However, after that tyrant was killed by the Sword King City, the divine weapon was damaged and the sword spirit was damaged. It could no longer be used normally. Moreover, this item consumed a lot of energy and was incomparably fierce. Most of the Sword King City's martial artists wouldn't use this item, so they gave it to Lin Kaiyun as a life-saving item. As Lin Kaiyun formed a sword art, the killing intent on the blood-drop sword was completely released. The blood-red radiance illuminated more than 10 meters and quickly slashed at Chu Xiu. The moment Lin Kaiyun's blood-drop sword blossomed with blood-red radiance and aimed at him, Chu Xiu had already sensed the killing intent. However, Chu Xiu was still puzzled. Who would want to kill him at this time? But after thinking about it carefully, it seemed like he had quite a number of enemies. But when Chu Xiu saw that it was Lin Kaiyun and Do Guangchen who made the move, Chu Xiu didn't expect it. These two fellows must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to actually make a move against him at this time. Chu Xiu had long disregarded a character like Lin Kaiyun, and it was the same for Dou Guangchen. Even Chu Xiu from the Azure Billow Sword sect who was behind Dou Guangchen didn't even put Chu Xiu in his eyes. The Azure Billow Sword sect's strength had declined severely and was already a thing of the past. Even if Chu Xiu didn't find trouble with the Azure Billow Sword sect, the Azure Billow Sword sect would also gradually weaken after Lu Gongyuan's death. Now, these two fellows actually dared to make a move against him. Were they really tired of living? But Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something and reacted. These two fellows weren't tired of living, but they just wanted to add insult to injury. After he defeated Zhong Xian, his strength and stamina were already severely depleted. Right now, Chu Xiu might not be able to see his complexion, but he reckoned that it should be extremely ugly. Because of this, Lin Kaiyun and Dou Guangchen seemed to have some courage and dared to make a move against him. It was a pity that these two didn't know that even if it was a giant dragon that couldn't fly, it wouldn't be eaten by wild dogs. The blood-colored sword light slashed over, and the prowess was shocking enough. Even if Chu Xiu was at his prime, he would have to use 70% of his strength to block it. But the problem was that Chu Xiu didn't need to block it now. At the moment when the blood light slashed over, Chu Xiu had already executed the heaven's sun gazing at air. It seemed like a simple step, but it was just enough to dodge the blood light's slash. The blood light's strength was indeed not weak, but it was the dripping blood sword itself that was strong, not Lin Kaiyun. Based on the sword technique that he executed with his pitiful sword Dao Cultivation, Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air could easily see through it. In fact, as long as Lin Kaiyun raised his hand, Chu Xiu would already be able to see through the trajectory of his move. Therefore, Lin Kaiyun could only watch the scene in front of him in disbelief. Although the blood light on his dripping blood sword was powerful, it didn't even touch Chu Xiu's side. It was as if he was deliberately going easy on him. The sword light landed in the empty space near Chu Xiu's body, accurately avoiding Chu Xiu's body. The power brought by burning qi and blood was limited. At this moment, Dou Guangchen's face was already pale, and he roared, "Lin Kaiyun! What the hell are you doing? Are you trying to kill Chu Xiu, or are you trying to trick me? I can't hold on any longer, you can play by yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, Dou Guangchen stopped burning his qi and blood, but the blood light on the dripping blood sword immediately began to dim. Lin Kaiyun gritted his teeth, and the qi and blood around his body also began to burn crazily. However, the blood light still brushed past Chu Xiu, and he could only watch as Chu Xiu casually walked in front of him and Dou Guangchen. Looking at Chu Xiu, Dou Guangchen could not help but tremble when he thought of the power Chu Xiu had displayed when he had defeated Zhong Xian. Just as Dou Guangchen was about to say something, Chu Xiu took a step forward and punched. His fist was already in front of Dou Guangchen, and there was a violent sonic boom in the air. Along with the sound of the sonic boom, there was also a subtle sound, as if something had shattered. There was silence in the air. Perhaps only the flying blood and minced flesh could prove Dou Guangchen's existence. Chapter 589. If someone wants to kill me, then I will kill them. Facing Dou Guangchen, Chu Xiu didn't wish to speak any nonsense. However, everyone who witnessed this scene shuddered violently. This Chu Xiu was truly ruthless. A unity of heaven and man martial artist was actually turned into minced meat with a single punch. Even though Dou Guangchen burned his essence blood and overdraft his physical strength, Chu Xiu didn't have much strength left. Yet, Chu Xiu was still able to create such an outcome. It was imaginable how big of a gap there was between both parties. Seeing Dou Guangchen being killed, a portion of the Azure Water Sword sect disciples revealed a cowardly expression, but the majority of the disciples were scolding Chu Xiu in grief. No matter what, a disciple of a major sect had to have the spirit and foundation of a major sect's disciple. Although the Azure Water Sword sect wasn't considered a top major sect now, they still had the foundation. They wouldn't be like a rabble that would wail and flee in all directions just because one person was killed. Chu Xiu suddenly sighed, Azure Water Sword sect, I gave you guys a chance. Unfortunately, you guys didn't cherish it. Chu Xiu was speaking the truth. He really gave the Azure Water Sword sect a chance. Back at the Divine Weapon Conference, Shunbai took the initiative to challenge Chu Xiu, but he was crippled by Chu Xiu. At the beginning, Chu Xiu did want to get rid of the Azure Water Sword sect and get it over with once and for all. But at that time, Chu Xiu had a lot of things to do. Furthermore, the Azure Water Sword sect still had Lu Gongyuan. It wasn't easy for Chu Xiu to scheme against a martial Dao master. In addition, the Azure Water Sword sect didn't look for trouble with him. Chu Xiu had forgotten about this matter until Chu Xiu's strength improved greatly. In fact, he never thought of looking for trouble with the Azure Water Sword sect. However, he didn't expect that some people would take the initiative to find trouble with him even though he didn't look for trouble with others. In that case, don't blame him for being ruthless. Chu Xiu's fingers flicked gently. It looked like a seal, but it didn't seem to be. However, with the flick of Chu Xiu's finger, a thunderous explosion resounded in the ears of an Azure Water Sword sect disciple. The power vibrated and instantly shattered his heart meridian, causing the three-flower realm martial artist to bleed from all 7 orifices and fall to the ground. As Chu Xiu's fingers constantly flicked, the Azure Water Sword sect's martial artists' heart meridians ruptured one after another. They wailed as they tried to escape, but in the end, none of them managed to escape more than 100 feet. Chu Xiu's strength caused everyone present to suck in a breath of cold air when they saw how easily he killed someone. In fact, this wasn't some profound martial art. It was just a temporary method that Chu Xiu created by combining the lion seal with his spiritual force. It couldn't even be considered a cultivation method, but a method of using power. It was useless against opponents of the same rank or even stronger than him. However, it was used to kill martial artists who were far weaker than him. It was like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. His opponents didn't have any ability to resist. At this moment, Chu Xiu looked at Lin Kaiyun again. Lin Kaiyun's hand trembled, and Bing Shui almost fell to the ground. His face was pale, partly because of the consequences of burning his blood essence, and partly because he was frightened. Looking at Chu Xiu, Lin Kaiyun's expression was even more unbearable. He didn't even resist and just shouted in a fierce tone, Chu Xiu. You can't kill me. If you kill me, my Sword King city will not rest until you are dead. At this moment, everyone else also saw this scene. Bai Qian's expression suddenly changed as he quickly shouted, Chu Xiu. Stop. It was true that Lin Kaiyun had made the first move, but Lin Kaiyun was still a disciple of Sword King city. He could punish Lin Kaiyun, but he could not allow Chu Xiu to kill Lin Kaiyun in public. Fang Qi Shao also shouted from behind, Brother Chu. Calm down. Don't be impulsive. Although Lin Kaiyun was on his side, Fang Qi Shao hated him very much. Given his relationship with Chu Xiu, Fang Qi Shao naturally wouldn't fall out with Chu Xiu for Lin Kaiyun. He told Chu Xiu to calm down for the sake of Chu Xiu. This matter was Lin Kaiyun's fault. He suddenly went crazy and wanted to kill Chu Xiu on his own. Now that he failed to kill Lin Kaiyun, it would be fine if Chu Xiu wanted to compensate him later. Fang Qi Shao could even help him deal with the matter. Bai Qian didn't have the habit of helping his relatives and ignoring reason like Sword King City's disciples. It was normal for one to accept punishment after doing something wrong. But now, if Chu Xiu really killed Lin Kaiyun in public, there would be no room for redemption. Sword King City would never tolerate someone killing one of their own disciples in public, especially when the murderer was Lin Kaiyun. He was an elite ranked on the Longhu list, second only to 7th young Master Fong in Sword King City. So as long as Lin Kaiyun didn't die, everything was fine. But Chu Xiu just glanced at Fong Qishao and Bai Qian. He flicked his finger lightly. He didn't have any killing intent, but it gave people a sense of extreme despair. Lin Kaiyun sensed this despair, so he frantically poured the last bit of his qi and blood into the blood-drop sword. He wanted to resist, but Chu Xiu's flicking of his finger directly shattered his heart and arteries. Blood flowed out of his 7 apertures and he fell to the ground with a loud bang, no longer breathing. He resented his sect for more than a decade, resenting his sect's masters for being biased towards Fong Qishao. But in the end, he could only choose to rely on his sect's prestige to save his life before he died. But when someone didn't take this prestige seriously, only death awaited him. Bai Qian and Fong Qishao were still a step too late. Looking at Lin Kaiyun's corpse on the ground, Fong Qishao couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Brother Chu, why did you do this?" He couldn't be bothered to joke around with Chu Xiu at this moment because the matter had become too big. In the past, Chu Xiu only had some enmity with Sword King City. But now, that enmity had turned into enmity, the kind that would only end when one died. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I'm just not used to making simple things complicated. There are so many enmity in the Jianghu, and it's nothing more than me killing people, and others killing me. Now that someone wants to kill me, and even hit me when I'm at my weakest, I naturally have to kill him. Is there even a need to ask why?" Fong Qishao was somewhat speechless. But this was exactly Chu Xiu's style of doing things. Sometimes, it was simple and crude to the extreme. Sword King City's style was very overbearing, and he always helped his relatives and not reason. Even if Lin Kaiyun attacked him in front of everyone, would Sword King City cripple Lin Kaiyun to vent Chu Xiu's anger? That was impossible. On the contrary, the enmity between him and Lin Kaiyun would only grow deeper until it reached a point where it couldn't be resolved. At that time, he would have to kill Lin Kaiyun again sooner or later. So, it didn't matter if they killed him sooner or later. Why not settle the matter now? Just like Chu Xiu said, "If someone wants to kill me, then I'll kill them." It was a very simple matter, and there was no need to make it complicated. Bai Qian stared fixedly at Chu Xiu and said while gnashing his teeth, "Good. Good. Good. You, Chu Xiu, are really awe-inspiring. You just defeated Zhongxian, and now you killed a disciple of my Sword King City. Do you really think that no one in Jianghu can stop you?" Although Bai Qian hated Lin Kaiyun for acting on his own initiative to attack Chu Xiu, Chu Xiu's act of killing Lin Kaiyun in front of so many people was equivalent to slapping Sword King City's face. If Sword King City swallowed this matter, then where would they put their face? 7th young Master Fong frowned at the side and called out, "Chief." Bai Qian turned around and spoke with a solemn expression, "7th young Master, I know you have a good relationship with Chu Xiu, but this matter is related to the reputation of my Sword King City, and it's not something you can control. You can't be willful in this matter." In the past, the teachers of Sword King City doted on Fong Qishao a lot because of Fong Qishao's strength and potential. So even if Fong Qishao did something absurd, it was still worth forgiving. But this matter concerned the reputation of Sword King City, so Fong Qishao couldn't act recklessly. Fong Qishao sighed helplessly when he saw Bai Qian's attitude. It was true that he was usually a little unruly, but that didn't mean he was a fool. He knew about the benefits of the sect, the prestige of his reputation, and all of these things. It was just that he had been too lazy to think about them in the past. Now that the matter had come to this, he couldn't interfere even if he was the most outstanding disciple of Sword King City's younger generation. After all, he was only an outstanding disciple of the younger generation, not the person in charge of Sword King City. When Bai Qian's hand was already on his sword, Guan Siyu rushed over from behind and said in a deep voice, "Hall Master Bai, could it be that you can't help but participate in the fight between the younger generation? It was true that the Guanzhong torture room was inferior to Sword King City, but they were in public now. Not to mention that Chu Xiu had revealed his terrifying strength and potential. Even if Chu Xiu was just an ordinary cultivator of the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu wouldn't allow Bai Qian to touch him. Bai Qian snorted coldly when he saw Guan Xiu in front of him. He let go of his sword and pulled Fang Qishao away. As Sword King City's Xingjian Hall's first seat, Bai Qian's strength was considered to be in the upper echelon of many martial Dao masters. However, Bai Qian really didn't have much confidence against Guan Xiu. In fact, Guan Xiu had always been looked down upon. Many people had dared to attack him when he entered the minor mortal heaven this time. Before Chu Xiu met Guan Xiu in the Three Pure Palace, Guan Xiu had already fought with many people. Among them, there was no lack of experts who were much more famous than Guan Xiu, but the result was that Guan Xiu had never been defeated. This time, Guan Xiu had also successfully snatched one Dao accumulation. There were not many people who dared to compete with him. Bai Qian had seen Guan Xiu fight, and he wasn't confident in winning. He wasn't even confident in staying undefeated. Sword King City's disciple had been easily killed by Chu Xiu of the Guanzhong torture room. If he, Sword King City's Xingjian Hall's first seat, lost to Guan Xiu as well, then Sword King City would undoubtedly lose even more face. Although Bai Qian didn't say anything ruthless before he left, he gave Guan Xiu and Chu Xiu a gloomy look. Clearly, he was saying that Sword King City would remember this matter and wouldn't let it go so easily. Chapter 590. The Three Pristines Hall completely collapsed. Those who obtained Dao accumulations and those who didn't, left in a hurry and scattered in all directions. Guan Xiu walked away with Chu Xiu with a gloomy expression. Then, she shouted in a low voice, "Why did you kill Sword King City's people again? Don't you know Lin Kaiyun's identity? Don't you know Sword King City's character? Do you really think they won't do anything to you just because of your relationship with Fang Qishao? Fang Qishao's face isn't that big." To be honest, Guan Xiu was really driven mad. He was very proud when Chu Xiu defeated Zhong Xian. After all, the Guanzhong torture room finally had a young outstanding talent who could suppress all the outstanding experts of this generation in the underworld. But it didn't last long before Chu Xiu caused such a big trouble and formed a deadly enmity with Sword King City. It turned out that Chu Xiu's strength was directly proportional to his ability to cause trouble. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Lin Kaiyun wanted to kill me, so what's wrong with me killing him? Since some people want to court death, then I'll fulfill their wish. If I were to endure it just because the other party is from Sword King City, then I'm afraid I'll be plotted against a second time. Retreating for a moment is a good thing, but enduring for a moment isn't necessarily a good thing. There are so many enmities and killings in the underworld, so many people wouldn't have died if I only revealed my background. Besides, although the Guanzhong torture room isn't overbearing, it's not excessively compromising, isn't it?" Guan Xiu snorted coldly and said, "You have so many excuses now. Why didn't you think about it when you killed people just now?" What Chu Xiu said was the truth. Although the Guanzhong torture room had been enduring and low-key, it had never compromised. In the past, Chu Kuanga was known as the great hero. He had been chivalrous and helped the needy, saving countless lives. But at the same time, Chu Kuanga had never backed down in the face of threats from various enemies. There was even a rumor that Chu Kuanga never spoke of fighting with his life on the line, but once he made a move, he carried an aura of a life-and-death struggle, as if he didn't care about his life. Although Guan Xiu wasn't as extreme as Chu Kuanga, Guan Xiu was also very strong-willed in the past. She had never chosen to concede in the face of foreign enemies, but now she was very low-key. Guan Xiu felt a headache coming on as she looked at Chu Xiu. It was a good thing that Chu Xiu was strong and talented, but his ability to cause trouble was already too much for Guan Xiu to handle. The Guanzhong torture room could not withstand Chu Xiu's torment. At this time, Chu Xiu said, "Hall Master, actually, you don't have to worry. Sword King City is strong in appearance but weak in heart. They won't cause trouble for us in a short period of time." Sword King City also suffered a lot during the righteous and demonic battles on Floating Jade Mountain. It is even said that the true fire spirit refinement realm expert of Sword King City, Duguli, was seriously injured. So, Sword King City won't make any big movements during this period of time. Moreover, everyone in Jianghu knows who was in the wrong. It was Sword King City's people who attacked first and even hit us when we were down. Although this kind of thing is normal, it's not good to say it. So, even if Sword King City wants to take revenge, it won't come so quickly. At least, they have to wait for the news to die down before they take revenge. Guan Xiu frowned and nodded, "Be careful and don't be too optimistic. The Xiaofan heaven will end in 2 days. During this period of time, you will stay by my side and don't run around." Guan Xiu was truly afraid. Chu Xiu's ability to cause trouble was too strong. If she didn't keep an eye on Chu Xiu might cause trouble again. Oh right, there is also the matter with the Azure Wave Sword sect. It is fine that you killed Do Guangchen, but don't provoke the Azure Wave Sword sect again. I reckon that the Azure Wave Sword sect won't make a move on you. Lu Gongyuan is a smart person. Even if he hates you, he won't go to the extreme without absolute certainty. Chu Xiu nodded, but his eyes had a trace of disapproval. According to his character, since he killed Do Guangchen, he didn't mind eliminating the Azure Wave Sword sect along the way, to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. But now that Guan Xiu had spoken, if he still brought people to eliminate the Azure Wave Sword sect, it would be a bit too much. It was likely that he would directly fall out with Guan Xiu. Therefore, the grudge between him and the Azure Wave Sword sect had to be considered at length. At this moment, Chu Xiu really hoped that Lu Gongyuan would be overwhelmed by anger and take the initiative to attack him. That way, he would have a reason to eliminate the Azure Wave Sword sect. For the next 2 days, Chu Xiu had been wandering around the Xiaofan heaven with Guan Xiu. Because there were only 2 days left, and the surrounding ruins had been explored, it was too late to go further. Therefore, for these 2 days, Chu Xiu and Guan Xiu spent most of their time picking herbs, cultivating, and so on. After 2 days, Chu Xiu felt the surrounding space was distorted. A force was repelling him and finally sent him and Guan Xiu to the outside world. The crowd outside the Xiaofan heaven was even more crowded than when the Xiaofan heaven opened. When the Xiaofan heaven opened, apart from the disciples of the major sects who could use various secret techniques to rush over, even if the others knew of the news, they wouldn't dare to come to the Wei County so quickly. Therefore, most of the people outside were martial artists and factions from the Wei County. But now that 10 days had passed, the number of people who came from all over the world of martial arts to watch the show was 10 times more than before. After walking out of the Xiaofan heaven, Guan Xiu looked around but didn't see An Liuyan's figure, which made Guan Xiu's heart skip a beat. The rules in the Xiaofan heaven were mandatory. Once you entered, you would be forcefully expelled once the time was up. Even a true fire spirit refinement realm expert wouldn't be able to withstand it. Of course, a true fire spirit refinement realm expert wouldn't even be able to move after entering, let alone resist the power of the rules. Now that the Xiaofan heaven had ended, An Liuyan would almost certainly be thrown out of the Xiaofan heaven. However, she didn't see any trace of An Liuyan. Needless to say, An Liuyan was probably dead. Although An Liuyan and Guan Xiu had never been on the same side, as long as An Liuyan was on the same side as the Guanzhong torture room, he would be useful to the Guanzhong torture room. Now that An Liuyan was dead, the Guanzhong torture room had lost the combat power of a grandmaster. To the Guanzhong torture room, entering the Xiaofan heaven was undoubtedly a loss. The most important thing was that Guan Xiu couldn't even find out who the murderer was. Although the Guanzhong torture room was best at this kind of thing, they had to at least have some clues. However, now that the Xiaofan heaven was closed, they couldn't find any clues at all. If they wanted to investigate, they would have to wait for 30 years when the Xiaofan heaven opened again. After the crowd dispersed, Chu Xiu followed Guan Siyu back to the Guanzhong torture room. Lu Fengxian's 4 subordinates were still in the Guanzhong torture room, so he naturally had to follow Chu Xiu back to the Guanzhong torture room first. However, Lu Fengxian didn't plan to stay in the Guanzhong torture room for long. He had just stepped into the oneness of heaven and man realm and was ready to go out and explore to stabilize his realm. Most people would choose to go into seclusion to stabilize their realm. However, for people like Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian, whose martial arts were more fierce and overbearing, it was faster to stabilize their realm in battle. "Brother Lu, where are you going?" Lu Fengxian carried his halberd and said, "Luo Feiheng is now managing the 9-branch hall and it's developing well. However, she obtained a part of the opportunity in the Xiaofan heaven and is preparing to go into seclusion for a period of time, so there's no one to look after the 9-branch hall for the time being. You definitely don't have time to manage it, so she asked me to help her manage it for a while and solve some problems." At this point, Lu Fengxian took out a secret box and handed it to Chu Xiu. "Brother Chu, this is a gift for you. I found it in the Black Demon Tower. I believe you will definitely need it." After she finished speaking, Lv Fengxian bid her farewells and left with Shui Wuxiang and the others. Chu Xiu looked at the secret box doubtfully. He was very curious about what gift Lu Fengxian would give him. Lu Fengxian had a calm personality and didn't like to joke around. Since he gave a gift to Chu Xiu, it must be something very useful to Chu Xiu. Opening the secret box, an ancient book made of leather appeared in front of Chu Xiu. Seeing the familiar material, Chu Xiu knew what it was without even flipping through it. This thing was one of the 7 volumes of the great sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang. In fact, Chu Xiu's trip to the Xiaofan heaven this time was to gather the great sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang. Mei Qinglian had said that the source of the great sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang was in the Xiaofan heaven. However, even though that was the case, Chu Xiu did not really expect to be able to gather all of the sorrowful Yin and Yang poetry of heaven and earth. After all, the Xiaofan heaven had been opened for a long time. Countless warriors had entered the Xiaofan heaven, but most of them only brought out one great sorrowful poem. It would be very difficult for him to gather all of them. However, Chu Xiu didn't expect Lu Fengxian to give him a surprise. She was indeed a person blessed with luck. Opening the leather book, there were a few big words written in evil characters: "Heaven punishing earth exterminating immortal godly finger." This great sorrowful poem was actually a rare finger technique. This really surprised Chu Xiu. After Chu Xiu flipped through the "Heaven punishing earth exterminating immortal godly finger," Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. It was indeed a standard martial technique of the great sorrowful poem. It was evil and ruthless, but at the same time, it was extremely overbearing. Whether this immortal godly finger could really kill immortals, Chu Xiu didn't know. However, its power could be said to be terrifying. With a point of the finger, all the internal force would be integrated into a point. Under the immortal godly finger, all the internal force Gang Qi would be transformed into an extreme death Qi. At the same time, this immortal godly finger actually required the user to be proficient in the primordial spirit secret technique. When using it, one had to transform the mental strength into boundless death Qi to destroy the spirit of the primordial spirit. With this point of the finger, what was taken away was vitality. The physical body and spirit would wither at the same time. Even immortals with longevity would have their qualifications to live forever taken away by this finger. Chapter 591. The 6 Gates of Great Compassion poem had been gathered, but there was still no news about the last one. However, Chu Xiu was not discouraged. This kind of thing depended on luck, and it was not something that could be forced. Just like this time, he was unlucky and did not get it, but the lucky Lu Fengxian got it. However, to Chu Xiu, it could be counted as his luck. After the Xiaofan heaven ended, there was nothing to do in the outside world, so Chu Xiu prepared to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. Chu Xiu needed time to refine the Taoist connotation that he had obtained in the Xiaofan heaven. He had also accumulated a lot of insights and experience from fighting with Zhongxian and Zhang Qingzhen, and he also needed time to digest them. Of course, there was also the divine finger of heaven and earth annihilation that Lu Fengxian had given him. Chu Xiu also needed some time to practice it. During the time when Chu Xiu was cultivating in seclusion, there were countless waves in the outside world. The Xiaofan heaven opened every 30 years, and it was about the time when the younger generation of the Jianghu began to change. However, the changes that the Xiaofan heaven had on the younger generation of the Jianghu this time seemed to be a little big. Among them, the most widely spread news was that Zhang Qingzhen had fought against 5 top talents of the younger generation and stepped into the martial arts master realm. Although everyone knew that Zhang Qingzhen would step into the martial arts master realm sooner or later, no one expected that Zhang Qingzhen would use such a shocking method to step into the martial arts master realm and condense the Thunder Golden Core. It could be said that it was a brilliant feat. After stepping into the martial arts master realm, Zhang Qingzhen naturally could not stay on the Longhu list anymore. However, he was immediately promoted to the 34th place by Wind Sweeping Tower. Just out of the Longhu list, he immediately occupied a place on the list. Even in the history of Wind Sweeping Tower, there were not many people who could do that. Moreover, Zhang Qingzhen's ranking was not low. He was ranked 34th, even higher than Yan Huainan of the Divine Force School. Above him was Cheng Tingshan of the Undistracted Sword Tomb, the master of the Hidden Sword Villa. Although there were some martial Dao Grand Masters who were dissatisfied with Zhang Qingzhen's high ranking as soon as he stepped into the Grand Master realm, they thought that Wind Man Lu was sucking up to the Celestial Master Mansion. However, those who had entered Xiafanshan and seen Zhang Qingzhen fight would not think so. Those who could condense the Thunder Gold Core were not weak. Zhang Qingzhen's performance when he was in the oneness of heaven and men realm was shocking enough. At present, Zhang Qingzhen had not fought since he became a guru. Many people wanted to see the power of the Thunder Gold Core, but few wanted to try it in person. Now that Zhang Qingzhen had left the Dragon and Tiger ranking and was ranked on the Wind and Cloud ranking, there was a lot of speculation about who would become the first on the Dragon and Tiger ranking. Wind Man Lu did not keep everyone in suspense and immediately released the new Dragon and Tiger ranking. The first on the list was Chu Xiu. Although most people already had a guess about this result, they still felt it was unbelievable to see Chu Xiu surpass Zhongxian and become the new first on the Dragon and Tiger ranking. Zhongxian and Zhang Qingzhen had been fighting for a long time. Everyone knew that the Taoist and Buddhist sects had produced 2 monsters. In any case, these 2 people were either first or second. It would be good if they could look at 3rd place. However, the result was unexpected. Chu Xiu appeared out of nowhere and defeated Zhongxian in front of everyone, becoming the first on the Dragon and Tiger ranking. This matter had a certain impact on the Great Light Temple's reputation. When Zhang Qingzhen was still around, Zhongxian was second. Now that Zhang Qingzhen had left, Zhongxian was still second. This was enough to explain the problem. Hearing this news, many disciples of the Great Light Temple were dissatisfied and clamored for Wind Man Lu to change the ranking. However, they were all suppressed by the masters of the Great Light Temple. Was it not embarrassing enough? Zhongxian actually had the strength to fight again in the battle at the Three Pristines Temple. However, everyone had seen him vomit blood after being attacked by Chu Xiu's 9 seals into one. This could not be refuted. On the Dragon and Tiger ranking, other than Chu Xiu who was first and Zhongxian who was still second, the ranking behind him had changed a lot. Among them, the third was Lin Yi of the Hidden Devil clan. In Xiaofan Heaven, Chu Xiu had used Lin Ye's identity to kill many people for the convenience of doing things. These achievements were extremely shocking to the outside world. Disregarding everything else, just the fact that Chu Xiu had used Lin Ye's identity to severely injure Su Xing and kill Jianghu was enough to shock the underworld. Fang Qishao was not weak either. However, he did not have such shocking achievements as Lin Ye's identity. Therefore, he was directly pushed down to 4th place. The 5th place was Li Feilian. Although Li Feilian did not attack many times, Chu Xiu would not have been able to kill Jianghu without his flying daggers. Moreover, during the battle with Zhang Qingzhen, Li Feilian's flying daggers even made Zhang Qingzhen wary. One could imagine how great the threat of Li Feilian was. Li Feilian became 5th while Ing Bailu was pushed down to 6th place, falling out of the top 5. In fact, Ing Bailu's performance in Xiaofan Heaven was not weak, especially in the battle with Zhang Qingzhen. Everyone could see Ing Bailu's strength. However, compared to the dazzling performance of the others, Ing Bailu's performance could only be considered mediocre unless he killed a few martial Dao masters to prove his strength. Many women in the underworld were dissatisfied with Ing Bailu's being pushed out of the dragon and tiger ranking. They complained that Li Feilian did not attack many times, so why was he ranked above Ing Bailu? However, Wind-Sweeping Tower did not care about these words at all. Ing Bailu himself did not say anything, so what were you women so anxious about? The last person to change on the dragon and tiger ranking was Lu Fengxian. He rose 3 places in a row and became 7th on the dragon and tiger ranking, second only to Ing Bailu. Compared to the others, Lu Fengxian's performance was not bad. He was someone who had withstood dozens of attacks from Zhong Xian and even used the demon god's unparalleled halberd and the unparalleled divine weapon to push Zhong Xian back. This performance was usually very strong, but unfortunately, compared to Chu Xiu and the others, it was slightly inferior. As soon as this ranking was released, it immediately caused a lot of discussion in the underworld. Of course, the most discussed topic was Chu Xiu and Lin Yi. Most of the martial artists who ranked first on the dragon and tiger ranking were from top sections. Chu Xiu was one of the few people who came from a humble background to rank first on the dragon and tiger ranking. Moreover, this generation's dragon and tiger ranking could be said to be the strongest in the history of the dragon and tiger ranking. There were many experts and countless talents. Not to mention Zhang Qingzhen and Chu Xiu, Zhong Xian and Fang Qixiao's strength were enough to rank first in the previous dragon and tiger ranking or the one before that. The main reason why Lin Yi caused the discussion was because of his identity as a member of the Immortal clan. The revival of the diabolism had long been felt by the righteous Jianghu. However, the entire righteous Jianghu was not a monolithic block, and there was no such thing as a Wulin leader. Before the diabolism developed to a certain extent, even if everyone was afraid, they would not join forces. After the great battle on Floating Jade Mountain, diabolism had completely revealed its fangs. It was a sign that diabolism was no longer satisfied with hiding in the dark, and was ready to surface. The 5 major sword sects could be considered as a coincidence. They had originally planned to use diabolism to strengthen their reputation, but they did not expect to draw out diabolism's true strength. Now that Lin Yi was ranked 3rd on the dragon and tiger ranking, it was a very good proof. Previously, this person was not well known, as if he jumped out from a crack in a rock. As a result, he amazed the world with a single brilliant feat and entered the top 20 of the dragon and tiger ranking. In the minor mortal heaven, he was even a grandmaster of array slaying. He surpassed many of the younger generation's talents and was ranked 3rd on the dragon and tiger ranking. If a young man from the Immortal clan had such strength, who knew what other hidden experts were in the Immortal clan? Not to mention the Immortal clan, just the strength of the moon-worshipping cult was enough to make many righteous sects apprehensive. Of course, these things were only considered by some of the major sections. As for some of the smaller sects and rogue martial artists, they were more concerned about the underworld's gossip. At this moment, in the Azure Water Sword sect's rear mountain in Wei County, Lu Gongyuan stood in front of the cliff. His complexion was old, as if he had aged more than 10 years in an instant, becoming an old man with one foot in the grave. Within the sect, one could still vaguely hear the disciples crying and cursing, but Lu Gongyuan acted as if he didn't hear it. In the minor mortal heaven, all the Azure Water Sword sect disciples died in battle. None of them survived. This was a huge blow to the Azure Water Sword sect. Do Guangchen didn't listen to advice and insisted on entering the minor mortal heaven. As a result, more than half of the Azure Water Sword sect's disciples died. Lu Gongyuan didn't know if he should be angry or sad. But even if he was angry now, it was useless. His Azure Water Sword sect's greatest enemy was no longer the same as before. Defeating Zhong Xian and ranked first on the Dragon and Tiger ranking, Chu Xiu's strength had already surpassed many martial Dao masters. With his old body, even if he fought with his life on the line, he didn't have much confidence. Hence, Lu Gongyuan didn't care about the group of disciples in the sect who were clamoring for revenge. Even though he hated Chu Xiu to the extreme, Lu Gongyuan didn't even scold him. Looking at Shenbai's seclusion, Lu Gongyuan let out a deep sigh. This was his Azure Water Sword sect's last hope. He would guard it until his qi and blood deteriorated and he was on the verge of death. If Shenbai didn't come out of seclusion by then, Lu Gongyuan was prepared to burn his last trace of vitality and fight with Chu Xiu. At that time, the Azure Water Sword sect would truly be at its end. It didn't matter if he lived for a period of time or fought with Chu Xiu. In fact, there were many people who criticized the Azure Water Sword sect in the pugilistic world. They all thought that the Azure Water Sword sect had declined to such an extent that it wasn't worthy to be one of the 7 sects and 8 factions. But Lu Gongyuan was still a famous senior in the pugilistic world. He still had some prestige and connections. The others didn't want to go overboard. Therefore, the wind-sweeping building didn't change the ranking of the 7 sects and 8 factions. After standing on the cliff for a while, Lu Gongyuan felt that the voices in the sect were much quieter. He then walked down the back mountain. But after Lu Gongyuan walked down the back mountain, there was a subtle sword chime coming from Shenbai's seclusion. It might be very soft, but it lingered in the air and didn't dissipate. Chapter 592. The aftermath did not disturb Chu Xiu. At this time, he was still cultivating in seclusion in the Guanxi land. What this seclusion brought to Chu Xiu was not the improvement of his strength. The most important thing was the enlightenment. Some of the fighting experience with Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen, as well as the divine finger of heaven and earth annihilation, were easy to digest. In fact, the most difficult thing to digest was the Daoist connotation. The Daoist connotation contained the purest way of heaven and earth. It condensed illusory things into entities. It had to be said that the strength of the Three Pristines Temple in ancient times was really strong. It was even strong enough to make people tremble. It could be seen from the attitude of the Three Pristines Temple. They casually threw out 9 Taoist connotations, as if the Taoist connotation was at their fingertips. Chu Xiu had been cultivating in seclusion for nearly a month. He had comprehended the Taoist connotation for more than 20 days, but he still did not gain anything. Moreover, Chu Xiu thought that his comprehension was already very good. In the end, he still could not understand the Taoist connotation. Could it be that the attribute of the Taoist connotation was incompatible with his? After thinking about it carefully, it was really possible. Taoism emphasized purity and inaction. If the requirement to understand the Taoist connotation was that Chu Xiu had to maintain such a state of mind, he would probably not be able to understand the Taoist connotation in his life. At this moment, in the secret room of Chu Xiu's seclusion, the black fog of devil qi filled the air. The figure of Mei Qinglian walked out of it. Chu Xiu knew that Mei Qinglian did not have the habit of knocking on the door in advance. Therefore, this time, he wore clothes in seclusion. Mei Qinglian's beautiful eyes were full of emotions. She stared at Chu Xiu without blinking. Her gaze made Chu Xiu feel a little scared. "I say, Your Highness, why are you looking at me like that?" Mei Qinglian chuckled and said, "Of course I'm looking at a genius that only appears in the history of Jianghu in 10,000 years." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Zhang Chengzhen is a genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. I'm too embarrassed to say something like 10,000 years." Mei Qinglian extended her jade-like finger and poked Chu Xiu a few times. "You don't have to be humble. Your strangeness is different from Zhang Chengzhen's strangeness. If outsiders were to find out that the first and third on the Longhu leaderboard are the same person, the entire pugilistic world would be in an uproar. It can even be said that you played the entire Jianghu by yourself. TSK, if you're not a genius, then who is?" Chu Xiu was stunned. "Lin Yi is ranked third on the Longhu leaderboard?" Chu Xiu was not surprised that he was able to obtain the first place on the Longhu list. After all, he had defeated Zhong Xian in public. However, he did not expect Lin Yi to be ranked third on the Longhu leaderboard. After all, when he used the identity of Lin Yi, he mostly used the Seven-Demon Saber to kill people. Su Xing was severely injured by the Seven-Demon Saber, and Zhen Yangzi was also killed by the Seven-Demon Saber. In addition, he was from the Diabolism, so it was inevitable that Wind-Sweeping Tower would suppress him in the rankings. They thought that he had used external objects to achieve his current strength, so they lowered his ranking. However, Chu Xiu did not expect Wind-Sweeping Tower to be so fair this time. Mei Qinglian said, "Actually, Wind-Sweeping Tower is quite fair. They are not a righteous sect, but they can't openly stand on the side of the Diabolism. This time, maybe Zhang Chengzhen caused too much of a commotion, or maybe the righteous sects have realized that the rise of the Diabolism is unstoppable, so they did not pressure Wind-Sweeping Tower to tamper with the leaderboard. This is a good thing. The more famous you are in the Diabolism, the more convenient it is for you to do things in the Diabolism." Just as Chu Xiu was about to ask Mei Qinglian what she meant by convenient, Mei Qinglian's expression suddenly turned solemn. "You killed An Lionian?" Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Is it that obvious? Did Mr. Lu tell you?" Mei Qinglian lightly snorted and said, "I already guessed it before that brat Lu Jin told me. An Lionian is not an idiot. He is considered a veteran in the pugilistic world. Even if he had entered the Xiaofan realm, he would not have killed himself so carelessly. Furthermore, he would have died so silently. Moreover, An Lionian has been keeping a low profile all these years, basically staying in seclusion in the Guanzhong torture room. Apart from you, I can't think of anyone else who would have a reason to kill him." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "We should have gotten rid of such an obstacle long ago. Saintess, you have been scheming in the Guanzhong torture room for so long, but aren't you a little too slow? If I hadn't made a move, it would not have been so easy for us to occupy the Guanzhong torture room with An Lionian around." Mei Qinglian frowned and snorted coldly. "You've become so arrogant after becoming number one on the Longhu leaderboard, and you still think that I'm too slow? The Diabolism has always been keeping a low profile, let alone my hidden devil lineage. If I move too fast, the righteous sects will notice some clues, and it is hard to guarantee that they will not interfere. Now, both the bright devil lineage and my hidden devil lineage have decided to make some noise. Even if you don't make a move, I will have to consider this matter." Chu Xiu laughed. If he remembered correctly, when he had suggested getting rid of An Lionian, Mei Qinglian had been wary of Guan Siyu. However, Chu Xiu did not expose this prideful woman. His expression turned serious as he said, "Saintess, since An Lionian is already dead, it is only a matter of time before my Diabolism takes control of the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, I would like to ask, if we really occupy the Guanzhong torture room one day, whose Guanzhong torture room will belong to? Yours? Mine? Or the entire hidden devil lineage?" This was a very sensitive matter, but Chu Xiu had never mentioned it before. Mei Qinglian was Mei Qinglian, he was him, and the Hidden Devil lineage was the entire Hidden Devil lineage. Both parties were related to each other, but they were also independent. The distribution of power after the matter was a very important matter. In the past, Chu Xiu was not strong enough, so he had no right to say these things. However, now that Chu Xiu was ranked first on the Longhu leaderboard, Chu Xiu and Lin Ye's identities combined, they could even rival some famous martial arts masters in the pugilistic world. Even without any background, Chu Xiu was not afraid of anyone. Therefore, he had the right to say this to Mei Qinglian face to face. Mei Qinglian took a deep look at Chu Xiu and said, "You are quite direct, but this is also good. If we make things clear in advance, then we will not be like those hypocritical righteous sections. They are brothers on the surface, but have endless internal strife. You don't have to worry about the Hidden Devil lineage, they will not want what you have fought for yourself. The Hidden Devil lineage is not a sect. To be precise, it is just an alliance. Everyone has their own forces, and they are united for the same goal. Therefore, although you can't get various resources and preferential treatment like those sects, you don't have to worry about any unfair or dirty things. Right now, the Hidden Devil lineage is only overseen by Senior Wei Shuya and a few other very senior demonic seniors. Unless there is a matter like the previous battle on Mount Fuyu that concerns the honor of the entire demonic path, the Hidden Devil lineage will not easily gather." After saying this, Mei Qinglian looked straight at Chu Xiu. A strange rhythm was emitted silently, provoking Chu Xiu's nerves. Mei Qinglian spoke slowly, but her voice was like a whisper, "As for you and me, I am not sure. Can I trust you now?" How powerful was Chu Xiu's spiritual power? It had even reached a point where it was stronger than most martial arts grandmasters. When the inner demon rotation technique was used, Chu Xiu's spiritual power was like a whirlpool, completely dispersing the rhythm. Raising his eyebrows, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "The Yin Demon sect's beauty technique is indeed extraordinary, but Saintess, you don't have to do this in front of me, do you? Are you afraid that I won't tell the truth?" Mei Qinglian said with a solemn expression, "I am not joking, I am serious. Chu Xiu, I can't see through you anymore. Actually, what I want is very simple. It is nothing more than the Yin Demon sect's reputation and inheritance. Previously, you laughed at me for not making any progress after hiding in the Guanzhong torture room for so long. I admit that this has nothing to do with the situation of the demonic path. It is just that I am not good at such things, so I have been a bit indecisive on some decisions and missed many good opportunities. When the Yin Demon sect was still around, I was the Saintess. There was a sect master above me, and a large number of disciples below me. I did not need to worry about these things, nor did I need to worry about them. Now, I am the only one left in the Yin Demon sect. I do not dream of rebuilding the Yin Demon sect with my own strength, but I want to leave behind an inheritance for the future of the Yin Demon sect. That kid Lu Jin helped you so selflessly in order to form a good relationship with you, so that you can join forces with the phaseless demon sect in the future. I can help you now, and even help you take the entire Guanzhong torture room in your hands. Can you help me rebuild the Yin Demon sect in the Hidden Demon sect? It does not need to be too powerful, just a reputation and an inheritance." Mei Qinglian stared at Chu Xiu. Her goal had always been very simple, but she did not know Chu Xiu's thoughts. This was also the reason why Mei Qinglian could not completely trust Chu Xiu. Mei Qinglian did have the strength, but she had been hiding beside Guan Xiyu for so many years, yet she did not manage to build much power. She did not even manage an Liunian. This was enough to prove that Mei Qinglian was not good at things like tactics. It was extremely difficult to rebuild a sect. A person and a sect with an inheritance were two different concepts. Mei Qinglian could live well by herself, but she did not have the ability to rebuild and manage a sect, nor did she have the ability to deal with all aspects. Supporting a person with ability was a very good choice. Mei Qinglian did not need to control a sect, she only needed to control a person. Chu Xiu was once such a candidate. However, as Chu Xiu became stronger and stronger, and even his power in the Guanzhong torture room caught up, the current Chu Xiu was completely qualified to be on equal footing with Mei Qinglian. Therefore, Mei Qinglian no longer thought of controlling Chu Xiu. She only wanted to cooperate. At this time, it was Mei Qinglian's turn to be more cautious. This was because she was not sure whether it was a blessing or a curse to cooperate with a person like Chu Xiu, whose thoughts were so deep that no one could guess his bottom line. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.